Chapter 1011. In the deep and silent Stellar Sword Palace, a martial confrontation of the highest level in the Empire was taking place. If the warriors of the Empire were to learn of what was happening here, they would undoubtedly be both surprised and delighted. They would be surprised because the two seven luminaries sword saints of the Empire were unceremoniously confronting each other, and a terrifying battle was on the verge of breaking out. They would be delighted because the confrontation between these two peerless experts would definitely be a rarely seen martial confrontation in the world. Even a mere thought of it was enough to make their blood boil and make them yearn for it. After all, these two masters controlled the strongest imperial army in the world and had the terrifying power to overturn rivers and seas. They were the most respectable people in the world, and when they fought, it would definitely be like a fight between immortals or Hulk going crazy. These were two seven luminaries sword saints, the pillars of the Empire, the heaven masters of the martial arts world. For the two of them to fight in the Stellar Sword Palace was definitely a grand occasion that would shake the martial arts world and shock the world. But what happened today would most likely not be known to outsiders. This was because the identities of these two sword saints were a little subtle. Firstly, Sun Lang was not a legitimate seven luminary sword saint. Back then, although he wielded the sacred sword and was active on the Tianyuan battlefield, the Empire did not publicize his identity. Only a small number of smart people and people of a high enough level were able to figure out some clues. Everyone only knew that Jia Ying was a rising star in the army, born in the Summer Province's Rongwa residence and wielding an unremarkable sword. Everyone knew that he was very good at fighting, and later on, they also learned that he was very good at fighting. But even the most imaginative person could not have guessed that the sword he wielded was the Earth Luminary's sacred sword, the treasure of the Empress Earth. This was very normal. Firstly, the treasure of the Empress Earth could not be used carelessly. For it to be wielded by a young and inexperienced person was a thorny matter that was difficult to explain. After all, this world did not favor the brave. Secondly, the Earth Luminary's sacred sword had an extraordinary significance to the Sky Demon. If this news were to spread and reach the Sky Demon, it would be hard to say whether or not Sun Lang would be able to smoothly mature. After the battle at the Great Desolate Mountain, the helpless emperor ordered Ping Yang to take the blame in a fit of rage, fabricating the legend of the sword saint of the nation coming from the west and suppressing the Sky Demon. Thus, Sun Lang and the Earth Sword Saint were completely separated. From then on, Jia Ying was Jia Ying, and the Earth Sword Saint was the Earth Sword Saint. Sun Lang only smiled at this. He wasn't a hero of the Great Desolate Mountain, nor was he a hero of the human race. He didn't want this false reputation. The Great Desolate Mountain was never a heroic story of unyielding resistance. It was a lie, a betrayal, and a bloody war that had yet to end. The two protagonists of the war were still wandering this land of survivors. They were both outsiders, the spirits of war. And the other protagonist, who had obtained Sun Lang's trust and betrayed him, who had almost single-handedly directed the chaos of the Battle of the Great Desolate Mountain, and who had brazenly stabbed Sun Lang first, was right in front of Sun Lang. He looked like the long-lost would luminary sacred sword spirit, Mu Li, but he wasn't. He was a lonely soul, a wild ghost, a spirit that had lost its country and flag, a spirit that had lived for a long time. He hid his identity and purpose in the darkness, plotting a conspiracy that no one could see through. The Emperor couldn't guess, and Sun Lang couldn't see through it. But this wasn't important. What was important was what Sun Lang wanted to do. General Shunsei stepped forward and walked toward Lingmu Li. The air vibrated uneasily, and a dangerous aura was constantly emitted. The spiritual plants were constantly shaking in the cold wind. General Shin's voice became low. "It's a pity that I didn't give you a good beating back then." Lingmu Li was still motionless. He turned a blind eye to Sun Lang's murderous intent and approach. "This is just a shell. Are you sure you want to be blinded by senseless anger?" Sun Lang smiled indifferently. "It's good to break one of the shells of the seven luminary sword saint. lest you hatch a good son from the wood luminary sacred sword. The son of Jin Yao is called Rushu. Do you want this one to be called Gomong? The devil ancestor Yuan said lightly. So you want to bear the crime of killing the wood luminary sacred sword saint? Sun Lang spread out his hands and said, Who will believe it? Ling Muli said lightly, I came to see you, and I've been fully prepared. If you really want to do it, I'll risk losing the shell and shout Sun Lang killed me. You have the ability to defeat this shell, but can you stop this sound from spreading throughout the city? General Shinsei nodded and smiled. Good idea. You really didn't give advice to the emperor before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been bullied so badly by me. What are you waiting for? The devil ancestor Yuan said calmly. I came to see you, not to frame you. This is just the last resort to guard against you. After all, this shell is very rare. It's a pity to give it up. Sun Lang kept walking. If you think it's a pity to give it up, then I'll definitely destroy it. The wood luminary sacred sword saint shook his head and said, Sun Lang, we are all old acquaintances. You don't need to use such boring means. You were so aggressive just to show your toughness and increase the bargaining chips in your hand so that you can take the lead in the negotiation. You must be interested in talking with me. In any case, you won't give up the opportunity to attack the emperor, right? I know who you hate the most. Sun Lang laughed. Then, Ling Muli also laughed. In the cold moon and cold wind, in the silent night, in the palace of Time Star Sword, the two most powerful creatures in the world looked at each other with a fake smile, adding a sense of gloominess and horror. After laughing for a while, General Shinsei nodded calmly. Yes, I'm a little interested to hear what ivory you can spit out, but there's a problem here. What's the problem? The devil ancestor Yuan was vigilant. Sun Lang had an ambiguous smile on his face, and there was a smile in his eyes. You said that I'm interested in talking with you. But compared to me, you, who took the initiative to come to me, need this negotiation more, don't you? Ling Muli's face turned cold. He could not understand Sun Lang's thoughts. An opponent who could not control his character and could not predict his behavior was very difficult to deal with. Sun Lang was such a guy. He said slowly, What do you mean? I mean, now it's a buyer's market. You came to me, so you have to let me play with you. Sun Lang showed his white teeth and smiled. Anyway, Ling Muli's shell is good. I don't know what method you used to possess this old bitch, but you'd better stay a little longer. Ling Muli's heart suddenly trembled, and he subconsciously put on a defensive posture. In the next moment, the overwhelming sword aura rose into the sky and slashed toward the body of the wood radiant sword saint, leaving a blood-red hue behind. The sword aura was unstoppable and unstoppable as it slashed toward the wood radiance sword saint's body. The devil ancestor Yuan was both shocked and angry. This lunatic does not play by the rules. It accompanied Sun Lang step by step as he grew up and thought that it knew his temperament well. Showing up tonight was also a decision made after careful consideration. It thought that Sun Lang would remain rational and calm. After all, it not only showed its strength, but also laid out the threat and proposed a topic that Sun Lang was very interested in. It thought that Sun Lang would at most take advantage of it verbally and satirize it, but in fact he would never do it. But he actually did it? The murderous aura was majestic, and the sword chi was swift and fierce. The killing intent and anger of Sun Lang's sword was like a blood waterfall hanging upside down for 3,000 feet, containing the most complicated and simple way of killing in battle. The power, momentum, and changes of this sword had reached the limit of martial arts in the human world, and the devil ancestor Yuan was facing the edge directly. Can't win, he said in his heart. Originally, he couldn't win. The enemy opposite him was a terrible monster that he had created. Even a most famous champion of the selection of saints in the history of his race could not match it. And the devil ancestor Yuan was only controlling the body of Ling Muli, which was gradually aging and left with internal injuries, and could not use the power of the origin to fight with Sun Lang. The result of this battle could be imagined. He was shocked and angry, for it was the worst result at the beginning. This madman, forget it. I'll give up this body and show him what I'm capable of. Controlling the body of Ling Muli to commit suicide and shouting out the words of framing Sun Lang before death, and using this as an opportunity to launch a comprehensive counterattack and clamp down on Sun Lang. This was the method that he had prepared after the negotiations broke down. Unfortunately, he had to use it now. The devil ancestor Yuan made a prompt decision, using the sacred sword of wood to lay down the enchantment of Jupiter, calling on the spirits of Shang De to block Sun Lang's bloody sword, and then preparing to shout. However, Lingmu Li, you didn't die. The words containing surprise and shock turned into rolling sound waves, like angry waves, with the Jupiter Sword Palace as the center, madly spreading to the entire imperial city. It was a big, full-frequency loudspeaker. The voice of this sentence was so loud, the momentum was so strong, and the skill of the lines was so profound that the Lingmu Li, who was ready to make trouble, was shocked on the spot. The devil ancestor Yuan was stunned. He really didn't think that Sun Lang's level of shamelessness was better than in the past. This guy not only shouted out that voice first, but also deliberately changed the tone of his voice. In other words, he faked another person's voice to shout out this sentence. General Shin's performance was not over yet. Without waiting for the devil ancestor Yuan to react, this drama queen took the initiative to add another play. After the majestic sword chi was blocked by the devil ancestor Yuan, Sun Lang slashed out a second sword. The edge was as majestic and heavy as the earth, and the essence transformed into all things, carrying thick virtue. It was the spiritual power of the earth, of the sword of earth. You King used my power to deal with me. The devil ancestor Yuan was stunned. His face suddenly changed, and he restrained the impulse to use the spiritual power of the origin to blast this bastard. After all, he still had a trace of reason. The two holy powers of the earth collided in the imperial city, which was too shocking and was bound to cause endless trouble. The wood holy sword was finally unsheathed. Thousands of mountains and thousands of green, blue sky, the sword chi, like invisible and tough vines, wrapped around Sun Lang. What about Sun Lang? After Sun Lang slashed out the second sword, facing the devil's counterattack, he just smiled. You can shout out now. After that, he slipped back, his figure rose and fell a few times and disappeared into the vast darkness, leaving only the devil ancestor Yuan, who was waving the wood holy sword and struggling to kill the sword chi. The fury in the heart of Lingmu Li was simply indescribable. He roared, Sun Lang, it's you. In any case, he couldn't let this grandson stay out of it. Want to run? Not so easy. This loudspeaker, which contained incomparable anger, rumbled to all parts of the imperial city. It seemed to point out to everyone that General Shansei had participated in some great secret activities in the dead of night. The devil ancestor Yuan gritted his teeth, ready to pull out the wood holy sword and the spiritual power of time, and throw the useless body of Lingmu Li here to frame Sun Lang. He snapped, Sun Lang, even if you kill me, you can't cover up your true face. Your conspiracy will. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. A loud shout, which contained awe-inspiring righteousness and righteous anger, sounded from a distance. In an instant, it overshadowed the dying curse of Lingmu Li and snatched the broadcasting rights of the loudspeaker of the whole channel. Before the people of the imperial city understood what had happened, they heard the broadcast of General Sun's righteous words. Wolsh *T. He shouted, I'm here. Which son of a bitch wants to frame me? There is something called talent, and there was a reason that there was a specialization in a field. Even if the devil ancestor Yuan was familiar with all kinds of sky demon secret methods and mysterious crafts, and had experienced countless battles and wars with his master, his combat experience and attainments in the art of war had reached the peak, and he was very good at layout and conspiracy. But after all, he was only his spiritual body in the sword. He had not gone deep into life and did not understand life. Therefore, when it came to improvising and dealing with unexpected situations, and the skill of disrupting the enemy's conspiracy in a way that they could not imagine, 10 of him could not compare to Sun Lang. Tonight, the devil ancestor Yuan understood the emperor's pain. Its anger rose. This bastard. Ah! He saw a figure moving in the distance. General Shunsei, who heard the shouts that spread throughout the city and felt the fluctuations of the battle between the strong, came at the fastest speed, had landed steadily, and his night clothes were thrown away. General Shunsei was wearing a close-fitting vest and trousers without wearing a coat, which was very in line with the anxiousness of running over to sea without wearing a coat in excitement. And the previous abnormal movement had finally broken through the enchantment of the Time Star Sword Palace, and the strong guardians in the Sword Palace were also rushing over here. Sun Lang looked at Lingmu Li, tilted his head and smiled. Suicide? Why don't you commit suicide? The devil ancestor Yuan clenched his teeth and looked at Sun Lang coldly. What do you want to do? Sun Lang chuckled softly. You're so ethereal that you can't be caught or touched. It's a little boring. It's also a good thing to restrict you to a spiritual wood. Don't you think so? Without waiting for the other party to answer, he had already shown a look of surprise and shouted in a joyful tone. Little smart. It's you. Lingmu Li. It's you. You are still alive. The sword saint of wood, who is still alive, looked at Sun Lang with cold eyes. The strong masters of the Time Star Sword Palace finally arrived. The fire lit up, illuminating the darkness and reflecting the faces of the two people present. Most of these sword sons from the Time Star Sword Palace did not know Sun Lang, but they must know Lingmu Li. They also thought that the sword saint had died in the great desolate mountain, but they did not expect to see him again. Exclamations rose one after another, and Sun Lang secretly winked at Lingmu Li, and his words revealed the meaning. I think now we can have a good talk. Chapter 10-12. All the countermeasures had been taken into account by the other party. The Sky Demon of the Origin was both shocked and angry. Sun Lang, this *T stirrer, casually swung his hand and easily solved his response and counterattack. Advancing and retreating, he had taken the initiative twice. The trick of Lingmu Li faking his death and framing Sun Lang had lost its effect. Now, the aftermath of the battle and the full-frequency loudspeaker had spread throughout the capital. The masters of the Sword Palace had been alarmed, and the sword sons of Sui Xing had rushed here as fast as they could. They had already lost the initiative. Under the cover of the fire, the members of the Sword Palace, dressed in green and standing with their swords, looked at the two people in surprise. One of them was thin and graceful like an immortal, while the other was dressed in strange clothes and had short hair. The two of them stood opposite each other. Just by looking at their momentum and bearing, one could tell that they were the top swordsmen in the world. Although Sun Lang had returned to the capital for more than half a month, stirring up the capital and suppressing the imperial court, the sword sons of the Sword Palace did not care about the outside world and cultivated in the palace all day long. They did not know the famous Shunsei general, but most of them had cultivated in the Sword Palace for many years and had seen the master of the Sword Palace with their own eyes. The Wood Sword Saint, Lingmu Li, the master of the sword of Sui Xing, it's really the master of the sword. The swordsman of Sui Xing stepped out of the crowd, holding a long and narrow sword with a vine handle. He looked at Lingmu Li with a surprised expression, but after feeling the endless wood spiritual power on him, he had already confirmed the other party's identity. The appearance was the same, and he had the holy sword. How could it be fake? He took a deep breath and bowed. Greetings, master of the sword. The sword saint was not here, so the swordsman was the actual leader of the Sword Palace. It was the same for the Mars Sword Palace and the Star Sword Palace. Now that the sword sons saw the swordsman kneeling, the other party's identity was confirmed. So they suppressed the great surprise and doubts in their hearts and bowed together. Greetings, master of the sword. In an instant, the elites of the Stellar Sword Palace all fell to the ground. Some of them were happy, because the seat of sword master that had been vacant for 2 years had finally returned to its rightful owner. Some of them were disappointed, because the previous sword master was still alive, which meant that their chances of succeeding the position were extremely slim. Some of them were furious, because their efforts and plans for the past 2 years had all gone to waste. But regardless of whether it was excitement, hostility, disappointment, or wariness, everyone suppressed their emotions and respectfully expressed their welcome and respect to the true master of the Sword Palace. Seeing this, Lingmu Li's heart turned cold. He knew that this was Sun Lang's plot and trick to bind him in the body of the Wood Sword Saint and drag him out into the sunlight to be scrutinized, questioned, and questioned by the public. He had to play the role of the Wood Sword Saint well and not make any mistakes or problems, because once he gave himself away, Sun Lang, who had been waiting for a long time, would definitely be the first to pounce on him and tear off his face so that his secret would be exposed to the public. Once the public found out that the Wood Sword Saint was just a body that was being manipulated, it would definitely cause great panic and anger. If Sun Lang took the opportunity to direct this panic and suspicion to the emperor, then no matter who he was, the true son of heaven or the living wise emperor, he would be thrown off the throne by the courtiers. What a sinister boy. He actually grasped the key point at once. The devil ancestor looked at Sun Lang, his eyes becoming colder and colder. Sun Lang laughed loudly, came closer, and affectionately put his arm around Lingmu Li's shoulder. "Little smart, why don't you say anything when you see an old friend? Damn it, where have you been for the past 2 years? Everyone thought you were dead, but I don't believe it. Not to mention other things, your ability to escape is first class." In the important place of the Sword Palace, the swordsmen were paying their respects to the Sword Master. In such a solemn atmosphere, everyone was kneeling on the ground, waiting for the Sword Saint to say, "Everyone, please rise." Unexpectedly, a very familiar voice pulled the Wood Sword Saint and began to talk. His tone and voice were no different from the idlers on the streets and alleys. To be honest, it was a little annoying. Someone might have broken his head from practicing in the Sword Palace, and said in an unfriendly tone, "Who are you?" Sun Lang put his arm around Lingmu Li's neck, raised his eyebrows, and smiled at him. "I'm the one who killed the Sky Demon with him on the battlefield of the Great Bear Mountain. Haven't you heard of me?" After that, he tightened his arm and asked with a smile, "Say something, little smart." After he parted on the Great Barren Mountain, Bai Yue ran back to his hometown to recite scriptures, and I went abroad for a vacation. "Where have you been hiding?" That person was scared by Sun Lang and was pulled back by his companions, so he didn't dare to say anything. Hearing Sun Lang's question, many people pricked up their ears, and they all had doubts in their hearts. The imperial court had clearly announced the death of the Wood Sword Saint, and the Sword of Jupiter had been enshrined in the Sword Palace. How could the Sword Saint, who had died long ago, suddenly come back to life? Gossip was human nature. Conspiracy theories were also human nature. That was why there was the slogan, "Don't talk about national affairs." That was why there was the keyboard Politburo, and that was why there was the Grand Chess Party. People often like to talk about national politics with relish, especially some unofficial history of political struggles and dark conspiracies. The story of the commander of war, Jia Ying, had been privately discussed by people for 2 years, and the story of General Shunsei, who had changed his appearance and returned to the capital city in a high-profile manner, had been the #1 hot search list for half a month. It was conceivable that the inside story behind the fake death of the Wood Sword Saint would definitely trigger a new round of hot topics. The demon ancestor was very annoyed. This was the most troublesome thing, which meant that he was about to come into the spotlight and be stared at with a magnifying glass by the onlookers and people with ulterior motives. The bored and suspicious people all wanted to smell the smell of conspiracy from the fake death of the Wood Sword Saint. It was quite troublesome. This was Sun Lang's malicious conspiracy. This wolf cub was very keen to hit his weakest point of defense, and forcibly pulled him into the spotlight to be scrutinized and guarded by all kinds of people. This strategy was rooted in human nature, which was exactly the problem he was not good at dealing with, because he was not a human after all, and could not think like a human. What should I do? Many thoughts had turned in his mind, and he was thinking about ways to break the situation. Perish together? No. The opportunity has been lost, and Sun Lang has firmly controlled the situation. Splash dirty water on Sun Lang, and continue to frame him? No, this is not my strength, and it happens to be Sun Lang's strength. In the face of such an opponent, there was not much room for choice. The failure just now had greatly awakened the demon ancestor. Don't try to play tricks and tricks with Sun Lang. With this guy's mind and adaptability, there were not many people in the world who could play with him. So angry. A lot of ways flashed through the demon ancestor's mind, but in front of Sun Lang, it was better not to use some means, because the results would be worse if he used them. But he could not continue to be silent. Otherwise, the disciples of the Sword Palace around would inevitably have doubts. But how to explain? As mentioned before, the demon ancestor was not a human being after all. He could not survive and live like a human being, was not good at communicating with people, and did not know how to lie subtly. Even if it had read all the memories of Sun Lang, it was just watching a short life of more than 20 years with a vast sea of memories and years of the holy sword the devil. It just gave him a lot of useless memories and experiences out of thin air, and could not change his way of thinking and personality at all. Otherwise, there would not be so many things in the future. At that time in the Great Bear Mountain, the demon ancestor was afraid that he would join the party. So now, it was a little unprepared and did not know how to deal with the current situation. But it did not matter. He had a close friend. General Shansei nodded understandingly and said, "Don't you want to say it? I understand. After the war, everyone was promoted and got rich, eating and drinking happily, but I was hunting down the remnants of the sky demon all over the world. Now it seems that I am not alone. Little Smart, did His Majesty also send you a secret mission when you stayed in the country?" Ling Mu Li showed a stiff smile. It felt that Sun Lang was trying to trip it up again. If it slipped down the other party's pole, it would most likely fall into the spike's trap. But what else could it say? It was also very desperate. Therefore, he could only remain silent and tacitly admit that it was true but not true. Sun Lang did not feel any pressure at all. He might as well say that he was the supporting actor and did not say a word. But he was able to speak, learn, and joke to the extreme. The ancestor demon spirit did not speak. That was really great. He nodded seriously and said, I understand. It's a secret mission that can't be disclosed. I know, this is called discipline. There are too many people here, so I won't ask you. Let's talk about it in 2 days. Oh, right. At this point, the Divine Strategies General angrily said, What happened just now? Who were you fighting with just now? I felt a very strong power. Also, why did you call my name just now? Could it be that the thief pretended to be me? Which bastard without eyes actually wants to frame me? He raised his hand and swung it down, murderously saying, Daring to frame me, he must be tired of living. I'll chop him into pieces. Little Smart, tell me its name. I'll help you take care of it. Ling Mu Li looked at Sun Lang and confirmed with his eyes that this was a shameless person. However, Sun Lang's words and deeds reminded him. The demon ancestor's heart moved, and then he took a step back without a trace. He blocked Sun Lang's arm and said lightly, This is the task given to me by His Majesty. You don't have to ask. Today's matter, just pretend it didn't happen. You do your thing, and I will do mine. That's it. Sun Lang shook his head. No. That big-ass bastard actually dared to frame me, intending to tarnish my clean and flawless reputation. If it weren't for me running fast and being quick-witted, that idiotic idiot bastard would have gotten away with it. Don't you think it's infuriating? I can't stand this. I must take care of it. Noisy. The demon ancestor was about to leave. The most important thing was to stop the loss quickly. If Sun Lang was allowed to play freely here, things would become much more troublesome. I'm leaving, and listen carefully, don't talk about today's matter. Don't talk about the details with others. The disciples of the Sword Palace looked at each other. After a moment, under the leadership of the swordsman, they said in unison, Yes. Of course, their mouths said yes, but their bodies may not be honest. But at this moment, the roaring sound of horse hooves came from afar, and a whistling sound came. Sun Lang raised his eyebrows and said loudly, Here. Swift and vigorous figures jumped in from the outer wall of the Sword Palace, one after another. Looking at their body movements, they were all people with excellent martial arts. As soon as they broke in, the wood enchantment of the Jupiter Sword Palace was finally activated. In a low, rustling sound, the winding and twisting vines and strange trees were ready to go. Sun Lang gently tapped the tip of his foot. Metal could subdue wood. The sharp whistling sound shook the sharpness of the sword, and the invisible murderous aura spread in all directions. In an instant, the grass and trees lowered and the vines drooped down. The disciples of the Sword Palace could not help but stand up and step back. The long swords in their hands vibrated uneasily. They felt the power of the great white Sword Palace's restraint. The soldiers who broke and came to Sun Lang's side. General Shansei waved his hand. "This is the Wood Sword Saint Muli. Children, quickly pay your respects." A group of Tian Yuan generals cupped their hands and saluted. "Greetings, Spirit Sword Saint." Sun Lang said again, "Recently, good things have happened in the Empire one after another. First of all, I have returned to the Imperial Court and will once again become the pillar of the country to protect the world and support the country. This is worthy of celebration. Second, tonight, the Woodsword Saint who has been missing for a long time has reappeared. Your Majesty has to go to the Imperial Ancestral Temple to fulfill your wish." Shen's words were strange and had a hidden meaning. But the henchman had been with him for a long time and had long been used to the tone of General Shen's speech. Hearing this, they very skillfully echoed, "General is right." The ancestor demonic spirit's face turned even darker. Sun Lang called a large group of henchmen to watch. These guys were all generals of the country, and they did not listen to his orders like the disciples of the Sword Palace. This meant that within 2 days, the news that Mu Li was still alive would definitely spread all over the street. He nodded coldly. "Good, very good." Sun Lang smiled and said, "Of course it's very good." The devil did not want to be entangled any longer. He said goodbye. Sun Lang tilted his head and said, "Why are you in such a hurry? We haven't seen each other for a long time. Don't you want to say something to me?" What he meant was, what happened to the deal and negotiation that they had agreed upon? Talk about your mother. The devil had made up his mind to leave. He left the disciples of the Sword Palace who were slightly at a loss and full of doubts. His figure flashed and blended into the shadows of the vegetation. The next moment, he would disappear without a trace. As for the intention of negotiating with Sun Lang, he had already forgotten it. It was undoubtedly a very stupid decision to come to Sun Lang tonight. But he still underestimated Sun Lang. General Shansei did not chase him, nor did he stop him. Instead, he waved to the henchmen around him. "You all heard the shouting just now, right? There's a bastard who wants to fray me. Mother of Asterisk, ever since I was young, I've always been the one to frame others. Since when did it become someone else's turn?" These lawless ruffians shouted loudly in other people's territory. F***CK. Sun Lang nodded. "Yes, but we have to figure out the identity of the other party. Muli has the secret order of the Emperor and the Imperial Envoy. He disdains to mix with soldiers like us. We don't expect him to do it. We have to do it ourselves. Fortunately, it is not completely without clues. The powerhouse who just fought with Little Smart here slashed out 2 powerful sword chi. The sword chi is thick and sharp. It must be scattered here. Let's study and analyze the attribute of spiritual power of this sword chi. What is the background of the other party?" The devil ancestor's figure that was about to leave stopped. Once again, it was flustered and exasperated, because the attribute of spiritual power of the sword chi was the power of Hutu, suppressing star. Chapter 10:13. This was a series of schemes. The devil Yuan instantly saw through Sun Lang's plot, but he didn't have Sun Lang's quick-wittedness. Things started in a hurry, so he couldn't think of how to deal with it. Because this was Sun Lang's deliberate scheme, one step after another, step after step. It could be said that the moment Sun Lang saw the devil Yuan, he had begun to set up this trap. He took the initiative to attract a large number of onlookers and confirmed the identity of spiritual Woodley. Then he set up a trap step by step, calling his old friends to create momentum. As for the sword light that contained the Earth's spiritual power, it was an extremely fierce, secret move. Once exposed, it went straight to the heart. As for his purpose, it was already very clear. sneaking into the Time's Sword Palace at night and assassinating the Wood Sword Saint. What an audacious act! General Shunsei said sternly, and the murderer pretended to be me and even deceived the Spirit Sword Saint, almost making me a scapegoat. This is definitely a subversion of the regime of our dynasty by the evil opposition forces. Investigate. We must investigate. We must get to the bottom of this. We must not let the loyal officials be wronged. The devil Yuan could not leave this time even if he wanted to. Damn it. How can I leave? If I leave and allow Sun Lang to do as he pleases, who knows how much trouble he'll cause again? The Wood Sword Saint could not bear it anymore. He reappeared and said coldly, Sun Lang, this is not a trivial matter. Do you have to make it known to everyone? Also, this is my Time Sword Palace, not your Shinto province. This is a secret of the imperial court and the business of the Sword Saint. Even if you want to investigate thoroughly, you have to hand it over to a department. With your authority, you are not qualified to ask. Oh, after reading General Sun's memory, this antique sword spirit still remembered the spirit of the law and knew that it was not easy to use the law enforcement authority. But Wutuo, you are a fool with a rigid mind. This is the Hutu Empire, a backward, feudal, autocratic country with no mature legal system. The law of the country is my law. The sun is bright, and the discussion in the imperial court is open and above board. Even if everyone knows, so what? Why are you King guilty? Also, why can't I do anything? He widened his eyes and said confidently, everyone in the court knows that I've been hiding my name for 2 years because I've been searching for the remnants of the extraterrestrial devils. The battle at the Copper Sparrow Pavilion even uprooted the forces of the extraterrestrial devils hidden in the capital, which was the first shot to annihilate the rebels of the extraterrestrial devils. Over the past half a month, there have been countless open and covert attacks and criticisms around me. I don't know how many remnants of the extraterrestrial devils are gnashing their teeth and trying to kill me. General Shin's eyes shot out a cold light. He looked directly at the ancestor of the Origin Sky Demon and said sternly, maybe tonight's assassination was a Sky Demon bandit who should be cut into pieces and burned into ashes, trying to frame me. At this time, it is related to the national security and the great cause of Tianyuan. Everyone in the Hutu Empire, from the emperor and his ministers to the people, should be responsible and should be investigated to the end without mercy. Why can't I do anything? In the empire and even the whole world, the anti-sky demon was the biggest political correctness. Only a dead sky demon was a good sky demon. This was undoubtedly the consensus of all the people in the world. The ancestor of the Origin Sky Demon wanted to say more, but Sun Lang shouted, Little Smart, I see that you are making excuses and obstructing us. Is there something strange about the identity of the other party? Today, the Suixing Sword Sun is a witness. The heroes of Tianyuan are on the side, the imperial sky is above, and the Hutu Empire is below. Let me see the true face of the murderer. He stretched out his hand and grasped the sword hilt in a reverse grip. A fire was ignited in the void, and the light illuminated the darkness. The bright breath of the fire raged out, and in the fierce red flames, the fiery glass-like sword body condensed into a solid entity. It was the sword of Mars Fire. Sun Lang held the holy sword of Mars Fire upside down and suddenly stabbed it into the ground. The sword edge with the blazing flame power sank into the floor tiles, and the spiritual power of the 7 luminaries' holy sword surged out. The 7 luminaries' holy sword was the top imperial army of the empire. It had the most tyrannical power, like the bright moon in the sky. Apart from the 7 luminaries, in a vast empire with hundreds of years of accumulation, only a few imperial army could compete with it. And the glorious spiritual power contained in the holy sword was a rare pure power in the world. Only the spiritual power of the same level could compete with it. As soon as the blazing fire spiritual power touched the ground, it triggered an amazing change. The devil ancestor's face suddenly changed and became extremely gloomy. It had guessed Sun Lang's plan. It wanted to stop it, but Sun Lang's spiritual sense had been locked on it. Because the sword wielder was Sun Lang, it was too difficult to interfere with the spiritual power of the holy sword with the body of the wood sword saint. If it used the power of the origin to interfere, it could easily crush Sun Lang's plot. No matter how high Sun Lang's martial arts were, he was a human after all. In terms of the control and understanding of the holy weapon, he was absolutely not as good as the spirit of the ancestor. However, in this way, Sun Lang could take the opportunity to find the location of the devil's body. In case this guy made a powerful beheading operation, then everything would be over. Or this was also part of his plan. He always had a way to put his opponent in a dilemma. No, it was not a dilemma. The devil smiled bitterly in his heart. Instead of saying that it was a dilemma, it was better to say that it had already chosen a path for the opponent. It seemed that there were two choices, but there was only one actual choice. This was called an open conspiracy. Ling Muli looked at all this indifferently. The spiritual power of the 7 luminaries level scattered on the ground was activated by the fire holy power. Some disciples of the Sword Palace with profound cultivation were at a loss, and then they were shocked. Their eyes were full of disbelief and then fear. Yes, fear. They realized the seriousness of the problem, tightly pursed their lips, and looked at the sword saint hidden in the shadows with uneasy eyes. Even the Star Swordsman's old face showed a look of horror, but they all chose to be silent, and no one dared to speak. However, the people of the Sword Palace were not the only ones present. Since the Sword Palace was unwilling to take the role of commentator, then the representative of Tianyuan would do it. Of course, it was not Sun Lang. As the giant and the leader, he naturally did not need to do it himself. General Shunsei held his sword with one hand and made a gesture with the other hand behind his back. At this moment, the generals of the Northern Theater of War of the 6 armies of Tianyuan showed great tacit cooperation. In an instant, Censor Wu Pongji stepped forward, and a look of shock appeared on his face. This is impossible," he exclaimed. The person who briefly fought with the spiritual sword saint in the Sword Palace was a peerless master. The aftermath of the two's confrontation scattered on the ground. General Shunsei used the fire holy sword to hit the ground, and it caused the resonance of the aftermath. The fire holy power surged down, and there were 2 forces that were not weaker than the spiritual sword saint at all. Pan Mei stepped out from the crowd, and her voice was full of disbelief. How could this be? Could it be that the murderer who tried to murder the spiritual sword saint and frame General Shunsei was a master on par with the spiritual sword saint? Yin Song immediately stepped forward. Stroking his chin, he stared at the ground with a solemn expression and paced back and forth. Then he said in a low voice, "Of the 2 forces, the first one has the will of endless growth, which coincides with the momentum of the Sword Palace. It should be the power of the Wood Star, which is undoubtedly the aftermath of the spiritual sword saint's counterattack with the Wood Star. But the second force, how is it possible?" He turned around and looked at his companions behind him. "Brothers, I'm not very knowledgeable, so I'm not sure. Could I be wrong? This is clearly..." The generals of Tianyuan all looked solemn. Some of them were calculating with their fingers, and some were mumbling as if they were facing a great enemy. They were also exchanging opinions in low voices. Then, Su Dingfang suddenly shouted, "We're not sure, but the sword masters of the Time Sword Palace are not sure either? The Time Sword Palace belongs to the Wood Star, and they control the wood element. They should be the most familiar with the mutual promotion and suppression of the 5 elements and the transformation of spiritual attributes." The powerful and heavy curved shot smashed into the faces of the people of the Sword Palace. But there was a deathly silence in the air. Even the otakus of the Sword Palace, who usually did not leave their rooms and only cared about training their swordsmanship, realized the seriousness of the problem. They recognized the second force that resonated with the Fire Star holy power. But they did not dare to say it. Sun Lang snorted coldly. The sound was not loud, but the sword masters were probably scared silly. Hearing this snort, some of them actually trembled in fright. It was easy to imagine how great of an impact their minds were suffering. Shinsei swept his gaze over the crowd. The disciples of the Sword Palace did not dare to look him in the eye. He said coldly, "You all cultivate in the Time's Sword Palace, training the sword to guard your heart, training your body to be clear, and calling yourselves the Sword Masters. You all carry a sword, but do you not even have the courage to draw it? You cultivate the martial way and advance bravely. Do you not even have the courage to say a word?" No. Sometimes, a group of people was not as courageous as a single person, because everyone was waiting for the person beside them to do it. Sun Lang sneered lightly. "Fine, if you don't say it, I will." Everyone raised their heads in unison. Panic and anxiety appeared on their faces. They wanted nothing more than to cover their ears. Shinsei narrowed his eyes and stared at the spirit flowing under the ground. His voice was very calm. Since the fire star appeared, the wood star flowed and changed. This is because we can create fire. Since the fire star appeared, another spirit surged and swept away the low state suppressed by the wood star. The reason for this change is because of the simple rules of the 5 elements. Fire can create earth, and wood can subdue earth. Without a doubt, he said coldly, this force is the earth star holy power. The people of the Sword Palace seemed to have been struck by lightning. Their faces were pale and panicked. They looked at the spirit with Li in unison. They had cultivated in the Sword Palace for a long time and felt the power of the wood star. They were well versed in the changes of the 5 elements. As with spirits, they were naturally sensitive to other spirits, so they knew that it was the earth star holy power. But no one dared to speak, because this matter was too serious. The Earth Sword Saint, the nation-protecting Sword Saint. 2 years ago, he turned the situation of the Great Barren Mountain around by himself and defeated the Sky Demon. His reputation was so outstanding that it spread far and wide. When the 6 armies returned to the capital, the nation-protecting Sword Saint led the way. The Emperor personally welcomed him for 30 miles. The left minister led the horse, while the right minister led the horse. The streets were filled with a sea of flowers. Countless people burned incense and prayed. It was a supreme achievement. If a man could have such a moment in his life, he would not have died in vain. After the Sword Saint returned to the capital, he rejected all the rewards and returned to the Star Sword Palace. He did not care about the outside world and returned to silence. He really had the demeanor of someone who hid his identity and fame. But it had been less than 3 years since the end of the war. People would not be so forgetful. In everyone's hearts, the nation-protecting Sword Saint was still like a legend. But the legend killed someone. Oh, it was an attempted murder. But it was still terrifying. The protector of the empire, the invincible nation-protecting Sword Saint, ran to the Star Sword Palace on this dark and windy night. He fought with the Wood Sword Saint for a few rounds and then fled. This was not the weirdest thing. The weirdest thing was that the Wood Sword Saint actually called out the name of the Shinsei General Sun Lang. In other words, he mistook the nation-protecting Sword Saint as the Shinsei General. How the hell could he be mistaken? The Shinsei General Sun Lang's real name was Jia Ying. He was the famous commander of war in the 6 armies of Heaven Yuan. He was indeed a famous general with outstanding achievements. But he had nothing to do with the nation-protecting Sword Saint who always guarded the capital and wielded the Hoodoo sacred sword. Therefore, there were only 2 possibilities why the Wood Sword Saint called out the name of Sun Lang. First, the Sword Saint mistook him for the wrong person. Second, the nation-protecting Sword Saint was pretending to be the Shinsei General. The first possibility was close to 0. But the second possibility was too frightening to contemplate. The world-famous and peerless Sword Saint of the nation actually came out in the middle of the night to frame a general of the imperial court, and he was almost caught red-handed. Putting aside the motive, even someone with the worst political sense would be able to smell the dangerous inside story behind this matter. Damn, this is simply a terrifying political storm. Everyone looked at Sun Lang with complicated expressions. Some were confused, some were sighing, some were mocking, some were curious, and some even felt pity for him. In their eyes, Sun Lang was in a terrible situation. because he seemed to have attracted the enmity of the nation-protecting Sword Saint, and the nation-protecting Sword Saint had taken the initiative to expose him. That was to say, he was almost at odds with the nation-protecting Sword Saint. Then there was the question, who would have a higher chance of winning a battle between a famous general with outstanding achievements and the nation-protecting Sword Saint who had saved the Empire? Obviously, it was the latter. After all, the nation-protecting Sword Saint was the savior of the Battle of the Great Desolate Mountain, while General Shunsei was at most a general who had bathed in blood in the Great Desolate Mountain. In terms of achievements, who could compare with the nation-protecting Sword Saint who had suppressed the chaos of Tianyuan? Moreover, the nation-protecting Sword Saint represented the hearts of the people. In short, in the eyes of everyone, Sun Lang was in a terrible situation. In this silence, General Shunsei broke the silence and said indifferently, "I don't believe it. There must be some other inside story. The nation-protecting Sword Saint has no reason to attack me." Some of the disciples of the Sword Palace sighed inwardly, while some laughed disdainfully in their hearts. "Weren't you very impressive before? Now are you stupid? You also know fear. You also know how to shrink back?" However, Sun Lang's following words made them doubt their ears. "I have lived an upright life with a clear conscience. Since I have such doubts, I naturally have to ask clearly." General Shunsei said calmly, "Someone, go and report to the Emperor. Go and inform the Ministry of War. Go and gather all the Sword Palace's sword attendants. Go and invite the Imperial Court's civil and military officials. Go and invite the Martial Arts Hall's Pavilion Elder. Go and inform the Ministry of Imperial Finances. I'm going to visit the Hutu Sword Palace at night and visit the nation-protecting Sword Saint. I want to have a face-to-face talk with him." Chapter 10:14. I wish to pay a night visit to the Hutu Sword Palace to meet the Sword Saint and have a face-to-face talk with him. Shinsei General Sun Lang said this. Great waves surged in the hearts of the Star Swordsman. He actually wants to jump right into the Sword Saint's face. It had to be said that in the eyes of the Sword Palace crowd, this Shinsei general was truly too brave. His actions were domineering and fearless. First, he discovered that the renowned and accomplished Earth Radiant Sword Saint was secretly targeting him. After being stunned for a short while, he decided to pay a visit to reason with him. That was the Mother * King Sword Saint. He was not an ordinary minister of the court. Was it really okay to just go to his door and fight? Everyone's hearts were in a mess. Of course, this was not appropriate. After all, politics was a cautious game of compromise. There was no logic in starting a fight right from the start. All the intense battles took place under the table. On the surface, everyone had to maintain harmony. For example, tonight, General Shansei had discovered the hostility of the Sword Saint. According to the rules of the court, he should have remained calm and collected, investigated from all sides, and then made a backup plan. But he actually made the decision to fight on the spot, and he even wanted to make this matter known to the entire court, dragging in His Majesty and the other ministers of the court. This was too rash. Was this how he fought a war? Even the disciples of the Sword Palace, who had the worst political sense and the most rigid way of thinking, felt that the general's actions were very inappropriate. He did not even leave any room for a strategic buffer. He raised his hand and pressed on all fronts. This was a great taboo in the art of war. But there was a rather sad problem here. Although the swordsman felt that General Shin's actions were inappropriate, but who were they? They did not even have the right to interfere or stop Sun Lang. General Shunsei had gone to find the Earth Radiant Sword Saint for a lawsuit. Was it up to the Wood Radiant's Sword Palace to object? Thus, they could only watch in confusion as Sun Lang mobilized his troops. Then, they looked at their sword master Ling Muley expectantly. "Sir, can you say something?" The devil ancestor Yuan stood still for a moment and then made a decision. No matter what kind of flowers Sun Lang was going to stir up, he had to leave. He had to return to the Emperor and discuss with the Emperor. But before he could do anything, Sun Lang sensed the change in his aura. General Shansei took a step forward, the sacred fire sword in his hand emitting a bright light. "Little Smart, where are you going?" "You are an important witness. You must stay and explain everything to me. The devil ancestor Yuan gnashed his teeth. One wrong step led to many wrong steps. At the beginning, he had miscalculated, and now he was also in a mess. In such a predicament, he was restrained everywhere, and he could not see the opportunity to counterattack. He clenched his fists and said through gritted teeth, "General, can I have a word with you?" Sun Lang raised his head and said proudly, "No." Ling Muley was furious, but he could only suppress the murderous aura in his heart. He swallowed his anger and said, "The inside story is too complicated. You should stop for the time being. Don't let the whole city know about it. Why don't you and I enter the palace tonight to meet the Emperor and explain it clearly in front of the Emperor? His Majesty will give you a satisfactory explanation." Sun Lang shouted, "No. The sword saint of the nation framed me. Is it the Emperor's turn to make peace? Let him come out and explain to me in person. Let's go to the Star Sword Palace now." The devil ancestor Yuan could not help but say, "Sun Lang, do you have to make a mess out of control? Fuck you." The general of divine strategies scolded with perfect articulation. His words were so vulgar that the disciples of the Sword Palace turned pale. They heard him scolding, "I was the one who concealed my identity and pursued the heavenly demon. I was the one who declared war and faced the malicious intent of the entire city. Today I was almost framed, yet I still have to consider the big picture." He took a step forward and said in a resolute tone, "Come with me to the Star Sword Palace." The devil ancestor Yuan was flustered and exasperated. This was the first time he intuitively felt what it meant to be battered and exhausted. It was impossible to go to the Star Sword Palace. Absolutely impossible, because there was no sword saint of the nation in it. The real sword saint of the earth was Sun Lang, but the betrayal and lies of the Great Barren Mountain had completely separated the two. The one who pretended to be the sword saint was the emperor's youngest daughter, Sun Lang, but the Princess Pingyang had been sent to Sun Lang by the emperor. Therefore, this matter had become extremely passive. Sun Lang insisted that it was the sword saint of the nation who tried to frame him. He also wanted to go to the Star Sword Palace to confront him. Obviously, he wanted to make a big deal out of it and involve all the departments of the empire in this whirlpool. At that time, the important officials of the imperial court would gather outside the Star Sword Palace. Sun Lang would point and curse, but the sword saint of the nation would be nowhere to be seen. What the hell was this called? This was called a guilty conscience, an escape for fear of punishment, and a big conspiracy. What a stinking pot of shit. Yes, this was the key to the problem. Princess Pingyang had already come to Sun Lang's side, and the devil ancestor Yuan had to control the body of Lingmu Li. He dared not be distracted for a moment. Where would the emperor find a sword saint of the nation? Find an impostor like a man of sacrifice? What a joke. Not to mention that the important officials of the imperial court all had high cultivation and sharp eyes. Even Sun Lang could not pass the test in any case. Others did not know whether the sword saint of the nation was real or fake. Because of his reputation, they had to be respectful. But Sun Lang was Li Kuei himself. Why would he doubt when he saw Li Kuei? He would have chopped him with an axe. There are not many people in the world who could take his axe. If the sword saint of the nation was really chopped to death by Sun Lang in front of him, this matter would be even bigger. It would be better to let the sword saint of the nation disappear. Thinking of this, even though the body of Lingmu Li was essentially a dead body, the devil ancestor Yuan, who was controlling this body, still felt the feedback of his crotch, the sadness of his balls. Today, he was really careless. He was not without regret in his heart. Sun Lang had been in charge of the army for 6 years. After experiencing many battles, he had become a famous general of his generation. He was very good at grasping the fleeting opportunity to expand the fruits of victory. Tonight, when the Star Sword Palace was in trouble, he caught the tail of the sword saint of the nation and made a big fuss. If he did not get enough results, he would not retreat. The devil ancestor Yuan was very sure of this. However, what should he do? At this moment, the sound of hurried horse hooves came from outside again. Sun Lang's Tianyuan cavalry was stationed outside the Sword Palace. The soldiers shouted loudly to ask the identity of the visitor. Obviously, they had already regarded the Star Sword Palace as their own military camp. Under the command of Commander of War, these guys were arrogant soldiers who looked down on everyone and would not give face to anyone. From the sound of it, one could tell that this group of cavalry was an elite force. However, they seemed to have received strict instructions and did not cause any trouble. They placed their mission as the #1 priority. Therefore, they were very cooperative in answering. Very quickly, the soldiers under Sun Lang's command came in to report, "Commander, the people from the palace are here to pass on His Majesty's verbal order." The devil ancestor Yuan heard this and was slightly relieved. Fortunately, the emperor was not stupid. Sun Lang raised his eyebrows and said, "Let them in." Yes, the real masters of the Star Sword Palace had become little invisible. A group of guards in bright armor hurried in. The leader saluted Sun Lang and Ling Muli. Unfortunately, General Shansei and Sword Saint would looked arrogant and did not have the respect of being about to listen to the emperor's instructions. Sun Lang even looked at him with disdain, as if saying, "What message did the devil ask you to pass on?" I knew this was not a good job, the guard sighed in his heart. Fortunately, most of the people on duty in the palace would automatically learn a skill to be submissive. After all, this was the imperial city. It was instinctive to be submissive. Even His Majesty had to be submissive to the Empress Dowager. He quickly adjusted his mentality. His attitude was neither servile nor overbearing, but his tones softened automatically. "General, Sword Saint of Spirit, His Majesty has an order to invite you to the palace." The devil ancestor Yuan was loyal and patriotic. He did not say anything and simply said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Sun Lang said lightly, "I defy the order. What kind of F***king job is this? You should at least say, 'Your Majesty does not obey the order.' Be more civilized." There were 10,000 horses galloping in the guard's heart. No wonder most of the rumors in the imperial city these days were related to this master. No wonder the chamberlains, eunuchs, and guards all looked like they had eaten shit when they talked about him. He was so F***king difficult to serve. If an ordinary minister dared to be so arrogant, he would have changed his face and pulled out his sword to lock the other party. How dare he defy the order and call himself Your Majesty? But if the other party was this master, he smiled bitterly and said, "General, we have a mission. Please don't make it difficult." The crafty general did not bite at all. He said coldly, "Why did the emperor only summon the two of us to the palace? What about the Sword Saint of Nation? What about the 6 ministers? What about the pavilion elder of Martial Arts Hall? What about Wen Sangong? What about Wu Sangong?" The guard said with a bitter face, "My position is humble. How do I know this kind of imperial court event?" Sun Lang nodded and said, "It makes sense. Come on, send a fast horse and invite the boss and the others out." The devil ancestor Yuan said coldly, "Sun Lang, His Majesty summoned you. You disobeyed the order and deliberately delayed it. You're not a minister. I advise you not to talk about it. It is right to enter the palace early to meet the emperor." Sun Lang did not even look at him. He waved and said, "Call people." Immediately, there were generals to assign tasks, and the devil ancestor Yuan said coldly, "If you don't go, I will go. Guard, take me to the palace to meet the emperor." Sun Lang looked at him with a smile and said, "What's the hurry? Wait a little longer." Ling Muli said coldly, "My legs are on my body. Can you control where I go?" General Shansei pondered for a moment and suddenly said to the people around him, "Where is the drum of the imperial palace? I think I should just beat the drum and complain to the emperor. Fuck, the sword sage of the country came to frame me. Is there any law? Is there any justice?" The devil ancestor Yuan was furious, and General Shansei was scared out of his wits. The Shinsei general ran to beat the drum of the imperial palace and complained to the emperor, and the one he complained to was the sword sage of the country. The picture was so beautiful that it could suffocate the world. General Shinsei knew that if this happened, his good days would definitely come to an end. So he begged and persuaded, and the ancestor demon spirit naturally did not dare to act rashly. While the two sides were pulling at each other, another group of people arrived in a hurry. The person in the lead had a jade-like face, bright eyes, and a mysterious crescent moon between his eyebrows. His face was full of anger, and his expression was very unfriendly. His eyes almost revealed the helplessness and resentment of every time I crack down on prostitution. You are there. The person who came was naturally the parent official of the people of the imperial capital, the loyal mayor of the capital, Baoshiren. After all, the imperial capital was under his jurisdiction, and even the slightest movement of the wind and grass would be transmitted to his ears. The previous loudspeaker shook the whole city, and naturally, it also fell into the ears of the governor. At that time, Lord Bao was playing the zither and drinking while facing the moon. He was accompanied by his fellow disciples. However, Protector Jean, who was used to lying on the roof and staring blankly into the night sky every night, was nowhere to be seen. Humans were not plants and could not be emotionless. Even though Bao Shiren believed that he had no romantic feelings for Zhang Zhao, he still felt a sense of loss. Kunan and others thought that Lord Bao had been cuckolded by Sun Lang, so they had to drink with him until dawn. Who knew that as they drank, 8 words floated over from the sky. Lingmu Li, you're not dead. Everyone was shocked at first, and then they almost choked. The name Lingmu Li was very familiar. Everyone thought for a while and remembered that it was the Woodsword Sage who had passed away. What was the situation that he was not dead? Before they could think about it, for more words floated over from the sky. Sun Lang, it's you. This time, they finally choked. The 4 famous hunters all spat out a mouthful of wine. If it was said that the name Lingmu Li still made them think, then the name Sun Lang really could be said to be extremely familiar. The few of them only needed to move their minds, and a certain hateful smiling face that deserved a beating would appear deeply in their minds. The loudspeakers on the entire channel did not stop. The voice that had called out Sun Lang in alarm began to denounce the other party's conspiracy. The 4 of them trembled in fear, and then they heard General Shen's righteous fart. It had to be said that the amount of information in these few words was too much, enough to make one's imagination run wild. The long-dead Woodsword Sage, the angry accusation against General Shinsei, and finally, General Sun's explanation and angry rebuke. Who framed me? It was too damn exciting. In short, Lord Bao gathered the bailiffs and constables with an incomparably complicated mood. Together with his senior sisters and brothers, he hurried over. Who told him to be the governor? This was his duty. They heard the voice coming from the east of the imperial capital, and it mentioned the Woodsword Sage Mu Li, so the location of the incident was very likely to be the Time Starsword Palace. When they came over to take a look, it was indeed so. Everyone in the imperial capital could hear the blast from the loudspeakers clearly. Although the commoners were curious, they did not have the motivation to investigate the secret. However, the various powers of the court and the commoners were all on alert. Ever since Sun Lang had entered the capital, they had been observing the changes in the situation. They all wanted to know the inside story hidden in the few calls that came out of nowhere today. Both in the open and in the dark, who knew how many hidden figures were moving towards the Sword Palace. And Sun Lang? After General Shinsei saw the governor, he was like an independent underground party member who had found an organization. He looked at Bao Shiren and said pitifully, "My lord, you are finally here. Bao is so wronged." Chapter 10:15. Everyone knew that the Empress Dowager was a feudal empire. Her society was backward and she lacked human resources. In the current empire, there was no such thing as acting cute with ill intentions. Everyone only felt that General Shen's tone was asking for a beating. "My lord, you're finally here." Bao feels so wronged. As this cry of grievance was heard, the silent Jupiter Sword Palace was suddenly filled with muffled groans. The simple swordsmen were shocked by the thick skin of an important official of the imperial court. Their saliva surged and choked upon hearing this cry of grievance. If not for the fact that they felt that it was too rude, the floor of the Sword Palace would have been covered with several dozen kilograms of filth. Lord Bao's face had already turned as black as the bottom of a pot. He had become a true black-hearted Bao. The capital governor's sharp gaze swept across the faces of the celestial origin generals as he laughed coldly in his heart. Mother Kerr, your subordinates are all here. As long as you give the order, the heavens will collapse for you. What are you feeling wronged about? Are you done causing a ruckus, and now you're here to pretend to be obedient? However, he could only criticize in his heart. These words could not be said out loud. He coldly said, "General, you are an important official of the imperial court. Please be more dignified." As the capital governor, he had a wealth of experience in handling cases. The first thing he had to do when dealing with an incident was to fully understand the situation. As an acquaintance of Sun Lang, he knew that if he wanted to understand the situation, he could not ask him first. Otherwise, he would definitely receive an incomparably twisted testimony. Thus, he took a deep breath and calmly said, "Is Lord Sword Attendant present?" This official is the capital governor, Bao Shiren. I am under the orders of the emperor to guard the capital. Tonight's incident has caused quite a stir. According to my duties, I should ask about the cause. All right, enough with the bureaucratic jargon. You administrative people just have too many trivial procedures. Sun Lang impatiently raised his hand. Reporting to Mayor Bao, I have an important matter to report to the organization. Bao Shiren glanced at him. General, please step to the side for now. This official wants to... Sun Lang placed his hand by his mouth and opened it like a loudspeaker. In a very subtle tone, he shouted, "Hey, can you hear me? Lord Bao, I'll tell you a secret. The nation-protecting sword saint wants to kill Ling Muli, and he wants to frame me." Lord Bao could not control himself and spat out a mouthful of saliva. His calm and unruffled aura was instantly shattered. It was not his fault that he was not shrewd enough. Anyone who heard such a thing would be stunned to the point of tears. He asked in disbelief, "What did you say?" Sun Lang shrugged. "I think I've already made myself very clear." Yes, of course he understood. However, Bao Shiren felt that his brain wasn't enough. He could hear every word Sun Lang said clearly, but when these words were put together, he couldn't understand it at all. The nation's sword saint was framing Sun Lang? What was going on? He subconsciously looked at Sun Lang. Although this kind of groundless speculation was rude, he instinctively began to suspect that this was another scheme of Sun Lang's. The capital governor's tone was somewhat skeptical. Could there be a misunderstanding? Sun Lang's face was filled with anger. He said in a sharp tone, "Lord Bao, what do you mean? Are you suspecting that I directed and acted in this play? I've been having fun at the Copper Sparrow Terrace every day. I've seen 3 of the best girls in the capital every day. Why would I come here at night to frame the nation-protecting sword saint?" He pointed at Ling Muli and shouted, "Look at him! The wood sword saint's coffin is flying away. Don't tell me that I went to the underworld to bring Little Smart back just to direct this show." Bao Shiren and the others were shocked again. It was one thing to hear the loudspeaker, but it was another to see the dead come back to life with their own eyes. The official document said that the wood sword saint had died in the Great Barren Mountain. It was indeed a scalp tingling. Could it be that the dead really came back to life? No, it couldn't be. Everything in the world had a limited lifespan. This was fate. Even if it was an incomparably powerful master of generation, even if it was an incomparably honorable emperor, it was completely impossible to escape from this fate. In the face of death that everyone was destined to experience, powerful divine abilities and endless power were all useless. A mortal body was dead, so how could it possibly come back to life? The long years of criminal investigation had made the 4 famous detectives become firm materialists. In their early years, they worked in the 6 Fan School and handled countless strange cases. There was no lack of scenes of vengeful ghosts and malicious ghosts killing people. They were really experienced and had seen too many. However, after in-depth investigation and careful reasoning, the layers of fog dispersed, and the mysteries were solved step by step. When all the truth finally came to light, everyone would find that all the cases related to ghosts and spirits had a common point. The so-called vengeful ghost coming back to life for revenge was not fate, but a plot by people. Without exception, their sharp and solemn eyes fell on the spiritual Woodley. Kunan, Di Huaying, Song Hui Fu, and Bao Shiren, the four famous detectives who used to be famous in the Six Fan School, looked at the wood sword saint who had come back to life at the same time. They didn't believe that this man had come back from the netherworld at all. But their hearts sank at the same time. This was a plot by people. Who was behind the plot that made the owner of the holy sword fake his death and hide in the world for 2 years? But they didn't want to think about it anymore. Bao Shiren's hands, which were hidden behind his back, slowly clenched. Yes, if everything today was a plot directed and performed by Sun Lang, how did he find the wood sword saint who had been dead for a long time? Then, the answer was obvious. In the most honorable place in the capital city of this country, the center of the world, the supreme monarch of Hudhu stood on the highest peak, controlling everything with the world as a chessboard. As the sovereign of man, he was rich and had an endless supply of chess pieces. Even the wood sword saint, who was 1 in a million, had to follow his orders obediently without hesitation, hiding his name and faking his death until now. What was the truth behind what had happened tonight? The four famed hunters felt waves of chills, as well as a faint tiredness. A gentleman would die for his bosom friend. The ambitious and hot-blooded officials were willing to dedicate their talents and time to the monarch and fight for the country and the world. But the reality was often far from the imagination. They would eventually find that this was a dark world. Sometimes, the monarch was not blinded by the treacherous officials. Sometimes the emperor himself was a vicious, selfish, and despicable idiot. The famous detectives sighed helplessly in their hearts. They were chosen by the sovereign king to become the bridgehead against Sun Lang. But it was also because of this reason that in the battle of wits and courage with Sun Lang, they increasingly discovered the dark side of the sovereign king that no one knew about. Now, it was just another multiple-choice question. Sun Lang looked at Bao Shiren and repeated his idea. I want to confront the sword saint face to face. His Majesty must be the arbiter, and the officials in the court must be present for the trial. It was just another multiple-choice question. Bao Shiren's heart thumped hard. No, his political instinct as a minister gave him the fastest answer. This kind of thing cannot be made big and cannot be made public. The people needed stability, and the country needed face. If it was made public, there would be a lot of trouble among the people, and rumors would spread everywhere. Even the Western would laugh at it. But then, Bao Shiren, the scholar of Lu County, raised an objection. Should he continue to hide it? Should he pretend to be peaceful? Should he turn a blind eye? How long will he delay and hide it? What is His Majesty doing? How far will Sun Lang go? Is there really no compromise between the two sides? Will the open struggle and veiled struggle end in the fire of war? What can I do? For a moment, Bao Shiren only felt a severe headache. Sun Lang's clamor, Su Wei's persuasion, and the jeering of the generals of Tianyuan were all in a mess, echoing in his ears. In the distance, people shouted and horses neighed. The second official edict came hurriedly. In such a short time, 2 waves of people from the Forbidden Palace had come. People understood that His Majesty in the palace was anxious. This matter was indeed very strange. This time, it was Feng Yongting, an old acquaintance of Sun Lang. He held the bright yellow edict and trotted over. He did not care about the interests of the imperial family and directly said, General, Sword Saint of Spirit, His Majesty has decreed that the 2 of you should quickly enter the palace to see His Majesty. Do not make this matter worse. Sun Lang said angrily, Nonsense. This matter is not related to the imperial family. Don't forget that His Majesty rules the world with us. Today, the important officials of the foreign court, the Wood Sword Saint, and the nation-guarding Sword Saint are all involved. The military officials of the foreign court, the sages of the Sword Palace, and the officials of the imperial treasury should be summoned to discuss this matter. If there is a mistake, we should be punished. If there is a conspiracy, we should be investigated. If there is a storm, we should be in the same boat. What is His Majesty trying to do? Feng Yongting looked as if he was burning with anxiety. He was also very confused, but he knew his duty. He could only bite the bullet and try to persuade him. General, don't make a fuss, don't make a fuss. This matter involves a lot, and it should be done slowly. His Majesty invited you into the palace to discuss, so he must have an idea. You should at least leave some dignity for the imperial family. F***CKU. General Shunsei scolded again. The imperial family's dignity is one thing, but I don't want it. I have just been called out in public. Once the sun rises, there will be countless rumors directed at me. You want me to focus on the big picture and pretend that nothing has happened? What kind of F***king logic is this? What kind of F***king world is this? Should honest people be the ones to suffer? Whose ancestral graves have we dug up? Feng Yongting said with a bitter face, I'm just a servant. Even if you have difficulties, it's useless to tell me. His Majesty is wise and powerful. He will certainly understand your painstaking efforts and give you a satisfactory explanation. Therefore, I ask General and Spiritual Sword Saint to quickly enter the palace and meet with His Majesty. We have to solve this matter. I won't go. I won't go. Unless all the ministers and the Sword Saint are here, everyone will enter the palace together. Sun Lang seemed to be unable to stand the shameless persuasion of the people in the palace. He directly said, You F***king only want to persuade me to enter the palace and only let me go with him. What if when I enter the palace, the Sword Saint suddenly jumps out to attack me, and Ling Mu Li stabs me from the side, and your people in the palace don't come to my rescue in time? My life will be lost just like that. Who can I find a reason with? These words were too scary. Everyone's expression changed. They wished they could cover their ears. This Shunsei general's mouth was unrestrained and unscrupulous. It was to the point that it made people's hair stand on end. Feng Yongting said angrily, General, please be careful with your words. The imperial family is mighty and majestic, just like the sun. How could something like this happen in the Forbidden Palace? Sun Lang didn't hold back and retorted, F***CKU. Ling Mu Li, who had been dead for 2 years, opened his own coffin, and the renowned sword saint of the nation came to frame me. This kind of daydreaming bullshit can happen. So what if there is a murder in the imperial city? Feng Yongting was choked speechless. Sun Lang's henchmen were enraptured by his words. The rest of the onlookers were trembling in fear. They shrank back like quails, wishing they could dig a hole in the ground and run away. They all knew that there was a cause of death in this world called knowing too much. Today's situation was exactly what had happened. The General of Divine Strategies had forcefully stuffed a lot of 404 content into their heads. But suddenly a wild laugh sounded. Everyone was startled. They all looked in the direction of the laughter and were shocked. Everyone recognized the person who laughed. It was the capital magistrate, Master Bao. Master Bao's parents in the capital had an outstanding reputation. They were loved and respected by the commoners, and were feared by the nobles. Bao Shiren worshipped the ancient virtuous people. He was strict with himself. He valued his appearance, his speech, his authority, and rarely lost his composure. But today he was laughing crazily. Kunan and the rest were the closest to him. They were brothers from the same sect. When they heard him laughing crazily, they were all shocked. Wu Ho's disciples all studied medicine. They immediately sensed that Bao Shiren's situation was not right. Di Huaying stretched out his hand to grab Bao Shiren's wrist. Junior brother. Bao Shiren used his strength to push his senior brother's hand away. He laughed and pointed at Feng Yongting. Ha, look at you. Look at you. Groveling. Hesitating. Being restrained. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Then he raised his hand. Over Feng Yongting's head, he pointed to the endless darkness. He was still laughing, still scolding. But the target of his questioning and mocking had changed from Feng Yongting and the rest to one person. He was shouting, roaring, questioning. Ever since Sun Lang had caused a ruckus at the Copper Sparrow Terrace, he had been accumulating pressure, accumulating questions, accumulating confusion. Reality and ideals were constantly clashing fiercely. Liu County Scholar Bao Shiren roared. What the hell are you thinking? What are you planning to do? How many things have you done behind the scenes? Why are you feeling guilty? Why are you afraid? Why don't you just kill him? Why don't you just kill his 9 generations? You are so powerful. You have so much power. You dare to do anything. Why are you scared now? Are you being pinched in some way? You let him humiliate you, make fun of you. How many things have you hidden? The faces of Feng Yongting and the others turned ashen. Bao Shiren had not mentioned names, but they had realized who the target of Bao Shiren's roar was. Feng Gonggong lowered his voice. His narrowed eyes flashed with the cold light of Sunran. While he spoke humbly to Sun Lang, that was only because the other was Sun Lang. In front of others, he was still that Feng Yongting. Bao Darren is probably going crazy, he said coldly. I advise you. Before he could finish, an irresistible power came from the side like a tsunami. Feng Gonggong, whose cultivation was ranked in the top 5 of the palace, couldn't help but retreat in a sorry state. Shut up. Sun Lang flashed in front of Bao Shiren, his expression as calm as water. Chapter 10:16. Bao Shiren from Lu Commandery. Even though Sun Lang had always claimed that Sir Bao was his close friend, Bao Haizi had never acknowledged this. At most, they were bad friends. They were bad friends, acquaintances with ill-fated ties. This was what Bao Shiren believed. Friends, close friends, honest friends, they either shared the same ambition or had deep feelings for each other. They could drink together, talk about the world situation, entrust their lives to each other. Only this kind of friendship could be called a friend. He felt that his relationship with Sun Lang was far from reaching this level. From the moment they had met until now, every conversation would turn into an argument, and every argument would turn into anger. In front of others, Commander of War Jia Ying was a legend in the army, an undefeated general who seemed to always shine with boundless radiance, loyal and upright. However, Bao Shiren knew that this was only on the surface. Commander of War was more like a hypocrite. Beneath his sincere, passionate, and loyal exterior was a pessimistic and rebellious soul. He had an endless amount of prejudice against the Empire, and he would often spout shocking words. He was like those mad students who had failed to achieve their goals, always complaining about the heavens and the earth, cursing this and that, the noble families, the imperial court, the sovereign, and the foolish commoners. He seemed to find nothing pleasing to the eye. At that time, every discussion he had with Sun Lang would end in an exchange of insults. From the moment they met, Bao Shiren had sensed something strange about this man. He didn't know how this man came up with these strange ideas, but he felt that this famous general of the present age was very different. This man seemed to have some unspeakable worries in his heart, causing him to express all of his depression as dissatisfaction with the outside world. There are many people like this in history. Poets whose names would go down in history might be incomparably frustrated failures in their official careers, which was why they would place their feelings on small paths to relieve their depression. Bao Shiren believed this to be the case, which was why he had been patient at first, planning to alleviate Commander of War's worries. Later, he felt that it was too difficult, so he wanted to change the other party's prejudice. However, after a few conversations, he had almost been brainwashed by Sun Lang. In the end, he had completely given up on treating Sun Lang. Of course, he had given up on treating him. After all, the other party was indeed like that. He couldn't change. As the saying went, it was easier to change mountains and rivers than to change one's nature. However, at the time, Sir Bao had watched coldly from the sidelines for several months. After careful consideration and careful research, he finally came to a conclusion. He felt that there was only one reason why Jia Ying was so cynical. That was because he wasn't married. That was why he had nothing to do. After all, he was Jia Ying. He didn't have the guts to visit prostitutes, and he didn't dare to get married. He had to force himself to pretend to be an old hand in romance. The longer he talked and laughed with everyone, the more depressed he felt in his heart, and the more he held it in. When a dog was in love, it would bite everywhere. When Sun Lang, this God's favored son, was in love, it seemed very normal for him to criticize the court and criticize Her Majesty. Sir Bao felt that this was the truth. Therefore, it was actually very simple to solve the problem of Sun Lang's political views. There was no need to debate with him, no need to argue with him. After he got married and enjoyed the benefits of marriage, his personality would settle down and his energy would be vented. There shouldn't be so many problems. That was what Sir Bao thought. As long as this fellow got married, everything would be fine. As for when he got married, there was no rush. Although this fellow used the excuse of the sky demon has not been destroyed, how can he call a home? By then, the sky demon's defeat had already begun. The Northern War Zone, led by Sun Lang, was madly advancing and coordinating with the other war zones. Their strategy of attack and defense had already changed. The dawn of victory had already appeared. The end of the war was not far away. However, Sun Lang did not get married. He waited until the day of victory, but silently disappeared from the final battlefield. He rose like a shooting star and disappeared like a shooting star. At that time, Bao Shiren had already become the capital governor. After hearing the news, he sat alone in the main hall of the capital governor's office for half a night. The mirror of clarity hanging above his head was so dazzling. He felt that Sun Lang's death was not so simple. Like many people in the empire, he still remembered that name and hoped to find his whereabouts and hear news of him. However, unlike many people, the capital governor did not want to think about the inside story of Jia Ying's death. When he thought of that possibility, his entire body turned cold. He wanted to find out the truth, but he did not dare to touch the truth. He did not want to see Sun Lang die, nor did he want to know the true cause of his death. He wanted to hear that Sun Lang was still alive. He wanted to believe that the reason he had disappeared was because he wanted to go out for a walk. If that was the case, then that would be great. But that was not the case. More than 2 years later, the first time he heard news of Sun Lang was from that unclear rumor from Mingzhou in the north. More than 2 years later, the first time he saw Sun Lang was at the Copper Sparrow Terrace in a mess, covered in weapons and spears. Sun Lang had returned, but with hatred, anger, and motives that he could not understand. He had returned to reunite with his old subordinates and friends. He had returned to take back the honor and reward he deserved. He had returned to take revenge on the people who had harmed him. The people he wanted to take revenge on were the emperor, the empress, and the entire country. Then what was placed in front of Bao Shiren was a thorny problem. What should he do? As an official, he should support the country. He should be loyal to the sovereign. He should eliminate all unstable elements in the country, maintain the stability of the imperial court, and protect the peaceful lives of the common people. But as a person, as Sun Lang's evil friend, as a scholar of Lu County, Bao Shiren, he could not disregard right and wrong. Marquis Wu was right. Bao Shiren was indeed not suited to be an official. His personality was too upright. He could not be like Android and the others who trusted Sun Lang and were willing to risk everything to help the commander of war demand justice. His personality was too straightforward, and he could not be like those royalists who shamelessly said Sun Lang is not wrong, but guilty, and felt that Sun Lang should consider the big picture and suppress his grievances. From the moment Sun Lang returned to the capital, Bao Shiren had been constantly wavering between loyalty and conscience. The pressure grew. The more difficult it became, the more helpless it became, the more disappointed it became. So, he could only laugh. Faced with this kind of problem, this kind of difficulty, this kind of complexity, besides laughing, what else could he do? Under the gazes of the crowd, the capital magistrate let out a cold sneer, as if he was mocking this impermanent fate, mocking this despicable human heart, mocking this damned world. Sun Lang withdrew his sacred fire sword and came to Bao Shiren's side. His face darkened. "What's wrong with you?" He stretched out his hand to grab Bao Shiren's wrist. But the capital magistrate used all his strength to push Sun Lang's hand away. His gaze moved downwards. His angry eyes turned from the imperial city to Sun Lang's face. Anger was still anger. He gritted his teeth and laughed, his eyes filled with disappointment and pain. He hissed, "There's no need for you to pretend. You and him are the same kind of trash." He laughed and pointed at Sun Lang. His bright and calm eyes were already filled with anger. The capital magistrate's angry roar echoed in the silent night sky. You are all ignorant men, selfish, bastards, cold-blooded. You don't care about anything. You don't care what this country will become. You don't care if the people will suffer. You only want to do what you want to do. You never consider the consequences. Bao Shiren's spittle flew everywhere, as if he wanted to vent all his anger. Hypocrites, what are you waiting for? Come. Now, pick up your swords and sabers and slash at each other until everything is destroyed. Feng Yongting had just been pushed by Sun Lang. The blood in his chest roiled endlessly. With great difficulty, he regulated his breathing and sternly said, Sun Lang, if you want Bao Shiren's 9 generations to be executed, then let him continue speaking. Sun Lang indifferently turned his head. Does he dare? Feng Yongting didn't say anything. The situation had completely gone out of his control. Originally, he thought that persuading Sun Lang to enter the palace to meet the emperor would be the most difficult problem. Who would have thought that new problems would crop up? The capital governor, who was perfectly fine, had actually gone hysterical and laughed maniacally. Moreover, he had said some shocking and treasonous words, which really caught him unprepared. If this was a normal situation, this kind of small matter wouldn't be a big deal. A single finger would be enough. Afterwards, he would be locked up in prison and dealt with as he wished. But Sun Lang protected him. As a result, this matter became 10,000 times more troublesome. Even with Feng Yongting's rich experience and ability to adapt, he stomped his feet and said, I don't care anymore. Sun Lang turned his head and looked at Bao Shiren. He could see the pain and disappointment in the capital magistrate's eyes, as well as ridicule. To be honest, from an outsider's point of view, Bao Shiren's manic actions tonight were unreasonable, especially when he suddenly became angry at Sun Lang. This was completely unreasonable. At least, this was what Sun Lang's subordinates thought. If not for Bao Shiren's special status and Sun Lang's somewhat wrong attitude, these ruffians would have already started cursing. But Sun Lang knew the reason for Bao Shiren's anger. He understood the anger and disappointment in the other's eyes. Looking at his eyes, he should have understood. Blackie Bao had already guessed it. He knew. Sun Lang was the Earth Radiant Sword Saint. So when he heard Sun Lang's accusation, he was shocked and then became suspicious. When he saw that Sun Lang was unrelenting and wanted to summon the important officials of the imperial court and the sword saint of the nation to confront the emperor, the suspicions in his heart were further confirmed. If Sun Lang really did summon the court officials and the sword saint to confront each other in the imperial city, then when the matter blew up, the one who would benefit the most would be Sun Lang. Even the emperor might suffer a heavy blow, because the real sword saint was Sun Lang. In front of the court officials, if the real and fake confronted each other with Sun Lang's methods, he would definitely be able to obtain a complete victory. Then, to say the least, tonight's so-called assassination was not planned by the emperor at all, because in the official documents, the Wood Radiant Sword Saint was already dead. In order to frame Sun Lang, taking out a secret weapon to fake his death and hide his identity was too much of a joke. The truth was that simple. Because they had guessed that Sun Lang was the Sword Saint, it was easy to come to a conclusion. All of this was indeed directed and acted out by Sun Lang. Perhaps he had coincidentally or purposely bumped into the Wood Radiant Sword Saint who had faked his death. Perhaps he had also encountered the other party's conspiracy, and then he had beaten the other party at his own game and counterattacked. An extremely ingenious plan that went straight to the heart of the matter. But the consequences, what were they? Perhaps tonight, the imperial city would bleed. Perhaps tomorrow, the emperor would stake everything on one throw. Perhaps the heroic legend of the Sword Saint would completely collapse. The people's hearts would be shaken. The country would be ridiculed. Great panic would sweep across the country, and the prestige of the emperor would be shaken. The resulting turmoil would be enough to last for a long time. Sun Lang had obtained a great victory. Yes, Sun Lang would win. Sun Lang had won another round. He only needed to win. He did not need to consider the means and consequences. He had come back to defeat the emperor, just like how the emperor would do anything to get rid of Sun Lang. Because of this, what could Bao Shiren say? He could not say anything. He did not need to say anything. After all, Sun Lang was only seeking revenge. This was a cruel battle of life and death. He would use any effective means to attack the other party. Just like on the battlefield, whether the means were righteous or cruel, there was no need to consider at all. It was very normal, very normal. But you promised me. Bao Shiren looked at Sun Lang, trying to turn all his sadness into disappointment. Master Bao still remembered the words Sun Lang had said to him. He said that he was doing a righteous cause. He said that he was stopping the emperor's ambitions and conspiracies. He said that he wanted to leave behind a stable country for the people he cared about. Then, like all the heroes in the history books, he would shout the slogan of glory through the ages, but he would wave his sword that was covered in darkness. He once remembered that Sun Lang had said that good people had to be more evil than bad people. Only then could they protect themselves. They had to use dark means to fight back against darkness. Only then could they defend the light. Just like what he was doing now. He used lies and deceit to achieve his goal. He had directed and acted out a play. He wanted to deceive everyone and achieve his goal. Bao Shiren could understand this behavior. Really, he could understand it very well. However, there was a faint sadness in his heart and panic. If he hadn't guessed Sun Lang's true identity a long time ago, then today he would also be one of the people deceived and deceived by Sun Lang. Perhaps he would even stupidly take the lead and seek justice for Sun Lang. This was what shocked and disappointed Bao Shiren the most. Because if he lied once, there would be a second time. The problem was today. How many times had it been? He recalled everything that Sun Lang had said to him. Those promises, those conversations, those doubts. How much deceit and how much sincerity were there? Bao Shiren only smiled. He was the capital governor, a minister of the imperial court. After he discovered that Sun Lang had directed and acted out a play, deceiving and spreading rumors, he could only smile, and that was all he could do. He did not say anything. Sun Lang looked at Bao Shiren. He lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "What I said to you that day is true." Bao Shiren slowly shook his head. He stared into Sun Lang's eyes and said slowly, "Then tell me, since you came back until now, have you deliberately deceived or concealed anything important from me?" Sun Lang was silent. Qi Lianyan's death, the truth of the great desolate mountain, the emperor's conspiracy, and so on. He whispered, "I'm sorry." Bao Shiren revealed a pale smile. "You and I are neither relatives nor friends. There's no need to apologize to me." With that, he spat out a mouthful of blood and collapsed. Chapter 10:17. Vomiting blood and fainting happened in the blink of an eye. The mist of blood Bao Shiren vomited stopped not far in front of Sun Lang, as if it had hit a transparent glass. It condensed into fine droplets of blood and fell to the ground. The governor fell backward and was caught by Di Huaying. Junior brother, Kunan and Song Huifu also rushed forward. Among the four of them, Kunan's medical skills were the highest. She hurriedly looked, listened, asked, and felt the pulse. Then, she sent a stream of inner qi over and reached out to tap his various acupuncture points. Sun Lang wanted to go forward, but he stopped. His face was expressionless, making it impossible to see what he was thinking. Another change had occurred in the Jupiter Sword Palace. The crowd was no longer in the mood to watch. Feng Yongting observed the situation and immediately saw an opportunity. As someone familiar with Sun Lang, he could see the disappointment in his mood. He struck while the iron was hot. Perhaps Sir Bao's mood is too agitated and has triggered an old depression. This is a sign of turning into the devil. Why don't we leave tonight's matter as is? Why don't you take a look at him first? Sun Lang turned his head and glanced at him. What are you talking about in your sleep in the middle of the night? If I don't take care of this matter today, wouldn't I have lost a friend for nothing? Feng Yongting was angry. He knew that Sun Lang was being stubborn. Although he didn't know what he had just said to Bao Shiren, it was clear that this kid's heart had been moved. But after all, it was only moved. The reason Sun Lang could become a famous general of Tianyuan was because he could cold-bloodedly separate his personal feelings from the overall situation. Now that the arrow was knocked on the bow, it would definitely hit. Even if Bao Shiren died here, he would continue to wave his weapon at the emperor and cut down enough battle results. The person who could make Sun Lang change his mind was not here. Feng Yongting's brows were tightly furrowed. He glanced at Sun Lang's subordinates and saw that after Bao Shiren vomited blood and fainted, some of them didn't seem to care. Some of them were staring at Sun Lang, and some of them had expressions of hesitation and contemplation. But they wouldn't change Sun Lang's mind. Some were unwilling, and some couldn't. At this moment, the unconscious Bao Shiren trembled again. His face was pale, and blood gushed out from his mouth. Kunan couldn't be bothered to wipe the blood from the corner of her junior brother's mouth. She took out the golden needles from her body as fast as she could. The needles were like the wind as she circulated her internal energy. Fine beads of sweat formed on her pure white forehead, but her brows were tightly furrowed. Her eyes were filled with worry. Miss Ku, who had returned to her youth, didn't seem to be able to suppress Bao Shiren's injuries. In her panic, she shouted, "Sun Lang!" Sun Lang immediately turned his head to look. Kunan couldn't care less about her old grudges with Sun Lang. The Gate of Extreme Yin. Junior brother Bao is possessed by the devil, and the power of the Gate of Extreme Yin can't be suppressed. At this moment, the figure of Lingmu Li hurriedly turned into a shadow in the night sky. He rose to the sky at the fastest speed and fled outside. Even when Bao Shiren vomited blood and fainted, the devil of the original ancestor still restrained his breath and remained motionless. And just now, he seized the most suitable opportunity. Among the people present, except for Sun Lang, no one could keep the devil of the original ancestor who controlled the body of the Woodsword Saint. The escape of the Spirit Sword Saint caused a burst of low cries, and many disciples of the Sword Palace even breathed a sigh of relief. General Shansei just tilted his head and looked at the direction where the other party disappeared. There was no sadness or joy on his face. He came to the front of Bao Shiren, squatted down, and reached out his hand to touch the crescent mark between the other's eyebrows. The vigorous and vast Neishi poured in like a river, temporarily suppressing the chaotic and violent Zhen Qi in Bao Shiren's body. But Sun Lang frowned slightly. He found that the situation of Bao Shiren was very bad. Perhaps he was too sad, or perhaps his spiritual wisdom had collapsed. The capital governor's cultivation was not weak, and he was wandering aimlessly in the 8 extraordinary meridians. And the most troublesome problem came from the space between Bao Shiren's eyebrows. The crescent gate was called the Gate of Tying. According to folklore, it was the path to pass through the 2 worlds of Yin and Yang. It was the evidence that Bao Shiren interrogated Yin at night and cut off Yang in the day. But most people in the imperial court knew that it was just a rumor. However, Bao Shiren was indeed gifted. He was born with a strange power between his eyebrows. There was an imperial army that was compatible with this power, so it was personally sealed in the crescent moon by Wu Ho. After becoming the capital governor, Bao Shiren worked hard all day. The arrest of criminals was naturally brought by the 6 fan school and the 3 groups of Yamen runners. In 2 years, he used the imperial army less than 5 times. But now, the Gate of Tying and the imperial army in the eyes of Yin and Yang were bringing trouble to their master. Without Bao Shiren's suppression, the imperial army showed signs of losing control. Sun Lang pointed his finger and temporarily stabilized Bao Shiren's condition. Then he said lightly, "His mind is in a mess and his emotions are in turmoil. There are signs of him becoming a demon. He needs to be nursed back to health." Kunan looked at him deeply and his tone became indifferent. "Thank you for your help, General." Wu Ho's disciples are also quite knowledgeable in medicine. Leave the matter of nurturing him to us. You have the world in your heart and have far-reaching ambitions. We don't dare to waste your time and disturb your important matters. We'll take our leave now." Sun Lang said lightly, "Okay." He stood up and said calmly, "It doesn't matter if Ling Mu Li ran away. He said that he was under the Emperor's secret order. He can run away, but he can't run away from the Emperor." Feng Yongting. General Shunsei looked at the most powerful eunuch in the palace and said lightly, "Today, For the sake of Bao Zi, I will give the emperor face. In exchange, the crazy words he said today, don't spread it out. Feng Yongting was overjoyed when he heard this. He didn't care about the rudeness in Sun Lang's words and nodded. Well said. Well said. So today's matter, is it over? For Sun Lang to be willing to take a step back, it couldn't be any better. But General Shansei revealed a cold smile. Over? You think too much. I only said to give the emperor face. What do you mean by giving face? What I mean by giving him face is that I'm giving him enough time and dignity to think about how to resolve this matter himself. I'm letting him issue an edict to summon the important officials of the imperial court so that he can give me a decent explanation. That's what I mean. He looked at Feng Yongting and said lightly, just this face, if he doesn't want it, then I will use the loudspeaker again and broadcast the news to all the citizens of the capital. Feng Yongting felt a chill in his heart. How was this taking a step back? This bastard was planning to advance like a hurricane. He lost his voice and shouted, Sun Lang, this is related to the imperial court's face. Don't act recklessly. If the matter of the country's sword saying is spread out, there will be a lot of things that can't be changed. General Shunsei sneered. Do you think I care about this? Feng Yongting shouted to the generals of Heaven's origin. Are you going to just stand here and watch? But it was useless to say this. Those who could persuade Commander of War to take action against Jia Ying were not here. Those who were here were either equally extreme or not important enough. Sun Lang said calmly, you can go back to the palace and make a report. I will give him a chance to organize his words. This is a rare opportunity. If you don't seize it this time, I'm afraid there won't be a next time. Feng Yongting was about to go crazy. He even wanted to retire from the palace and run to the Imperial Ancestral Temple to guard the gate. It was better than dealing with this bastard Sun Lang. He finally understood that the Battle of the Great Desolate Mountain had already driven Sun Lang crazy. The person standing here now was probably a lunatic who usually looked normal. But at this moment, a soft sigh drifted in from outside the Sword Palace. Tonight, something major had happened at the Jupiter Sword Palace. Anyone with a bit of power in the imperial capital had reacted. On the surface, the Sword Palace was silent, but in secret, people like Oxhead and Horseface were all rushing here. Everyone wanted to obtain first-hand information and find out what had happened. This was called spying. By spying, it meant that they had to sneak into the village and not shoot. The people hiding outside didn't dare to breathe too loudly, while the people inside wished they could lose their memories on the spot. In this tense and stimulating environment of 404, a soft female sigh suddenly drifted and was truly hair-raising. Sun Lang's expression subtly changed. He fell silent and lowered his eyes. That sigh was very familiar, and a familiar feeling was right next to him. There was hesitation in the voice. She wanted to persuade him, but didn't know what position she was in. She wanted to stop him, but didn't know how to stop him. In the end, there was only a soft and weak thought left. Please reconsider. For some reason, Sun Lang's irritation finally calmed down. It didn't disappear, but calmed down. Although the irritation didn't dissipate, it didn't affect his emotions and rationality. That was because there was someone he could talk to. Forget it. He said that old guy is lucky. The listeners all looked solemn. The messengers and disciples of the Sword Palace tried their best to associate the word old guy with the thin and old wood sword saint. They must be talking about the spirit sword saint. Yes, it must be so. Sun Lang glanced at the disciples of the Sword Palace and said indifferently, there's enough big news today. By now, everyone should know what they should know. Since that's the case, let the bullets fly for a while longer. Anyway, now that it's in the Imperial Palace, it's nothing more than a lawsuit. He waved to his followers and said, let's go back for supper. Tomorrow, we'll put up the posters. After that, he looked at Bao Shiren, but Kunan and the others had already led the bewildered Yamen runners to the gate of the Sword Palace. When the governor was unconscious, Kunan's words were the most effective. Sun Lang didn't say anything. The generals of Tianyuan came up to him. Some felt it was a pity, while others felt relieved. However, no one raised any objections. They were used to advancing and retreating under Sun Lang's orders. Soldiers only needed to obey. Pongji hesitated for a while and said slowly, "In fact, it's better to stop here. Take 3 steps forward and then take 1 step back. That way, we won't push our opponents too far. Today's matter is almost too big. Even if there's no debate in the Golden Hall, the leaders of the imperial court will feel something from your majesty's evasiveness. You've already achieved your goal. If you forcibly summon the ministers to the palace at night, it won't be good. Most of them will be dissatisfied because you've involved them in this trouble." Sun Lang glanced at him and said, "You're just giving advice in hindsight." Pongji smiled bitterly. They were Sun Lang's former subordinates, and had been for a long time. The military paid particular attention to strict adherence to orders and prohibitions, and everyone had long been accustomed to obeying orders. Furthermore, Sun Lang was a peerless general who meant what he said and rarely made mistakes. In terms of strategy and major events, who dared to sing a different tune from him? "Let's go." Sun Lang led a large group of people out of the Sword Palace, leaving the emissaries and disciples of the Sword Palace where they were. They stared at each other awkwardly. "Send a few people to follow the people of the capital office," Sun Lang ordered. "Don't need too many. Just send them back." Then he raised his voice, and his voice echoed around the Sword Palace. "All of you listen well. Bao He needs to recuperate in peace. No matter who you work for, no matter which department you're from, I hope you won't disturb him. Do you understand?" The members of the capital office who were leaving did not say anything. Di Huaying and Song Huifu took off their coats and wrapped them around Bao He. Then they used horses to carry him and left. Sun Lang watched them leave and then asked, "Aren't you going to take a look?" Zhang Zhao's voice came from the crowd. "Lord Bao seems to be fine, but Miss Ku and the others are not happy. If I go now, not only will I make them unhappy, I will also be mocked. Since that's the case, why should I make both sides uncomfortable? Tomorrow, I'll secretly go take a look." Sun Lang did not comment and said, "Pingyang, go back with them first. If the family comes to find you, you can first brush them off. If they push you too far, you can use me." Princess Pingyang's voice also sounded. She said softly, "I know why the family wants me to go back, but since Master is back, I can't do that anymore." Sun Lang nodded. "Then you go back first. I'll walk around by myself." Princess Pingyang hesitated and then asked softly, "Master, are you all right?" Sun Lang smiled and then quickly left. With a few leaps, he disappeared into the darkness of the imperial capital. After leaving the Star Sword Palace, General Shunsei left alone. This news was enough to make many people anxious, and General Shunsei had only gone to keep an appointment. The imperial capital was very big. In the darkness of a night, it was very difficult to find a person. However, Sun Lang and that person had a connection in the underworld. This connection was not innate, but an acquired connection. This connection could be called an ill-fated relationship. And when Sun Lang found her, he couldn't help but stare blankly. Before this, General Shunsei had imagined the scene when they met. He felt that the shy and pure woman, like a water lotus, would be wearing white clothes, like a fairy in white. Even in the darkness of the night, her white clothes were very eye-catching. Perhaps she would stand by the river, under a weeping willow, gazing at the calm river's surface, standing in the night wind, looking like an otherworldly woman. But Sun Lang didn't expect that a woman like Shen Yaohua would also wear night clothes. Moreover, it was a not-so-professional night suit. It looked like it was temporarily put together with black clothes, and it looked a little funny. The corners of Sun Lang's mouth couldn't help but reveal a smile, because the otherworldly woman in his impression wasn't standing alone by the river. Instead, she was wearing black clothes, hiding behind a memorial arch, looking around nervously. It looked like it was her first time walking at night, and there was a trace of curiosity in her nervousness. And at this time, Shen Yaohua also noticed him. When the woman saw Sun Lang, her eyes lit up. "You've come." But Sun Lang's tone was very cold. "You shouldn't have come." Chapter 10:18. You came. You shouldn't have come. It sounded like the pretentious dialogue in a stream of consciousness martial arts novel. But it was indeed Sun Lang's true thoughts. After General Shunsei saw Xin Yaohua, he walked up to her and said in a cold and dissatisfied tone, "There are many people keeping an eye on the Jupiter Sword Palace tonight. If you speak rashly, it will be very easy for people to notice. Moreover," at this point, he stopped. "Moreover, after you spoke, I changed my mind. If someone connects these two matters together, then you will be completely dragged into it." Xin Yaohua glanced at Sun Lang. "Moreover what?" Sun Lang said indifferently. "Nothing. The wind has been strong recently, so you should be careful." His tone was still somewhat cold. Xin Yaohua sensed the dissatisfaction on Sun Lang's face, but she also sensed the worry hidden beneath this dissatisfaction. The woman's brows relaxed slightly, as if she was in a good mood. She then explained, "I only heard the transmission, so I secretly came over to take a look." Sun Lang said, "What's there to see? It's not like I'll lose out." His words implied that Sun Yaohua had made this trip for the sake of Sun Lang's safety, although this seemed to be the case. But Miss Shun neither blushed nor loudly retorted. She calmly accepted this tacit agreement. A mature woman saw things from a different angle. She only raised her willowy eyebrows, looking a little angry. Now, it was her turn to express her dissatisfaction. "Won't lose out?" Her tone was very soft and pleasant to the ear, but at this moment, there was a hint of aggressiveness in it. "If I hadn't stopped you just now, would you really not have lost out?" Sun Lang calmly said, "I wouldn't have." Xin Yaohua's eyes widened. "But I still have to thank you." Sun Lang continued, "Thanks to your persuasion tonight, I didn't do anything wrong." Miss Shun was stunned for a moment and said in a low voice, "I just felt that your state of mind was a bit off at that time. My late husband once said that when people are angry, they will not make the right choice. So when anger shrouds your heart, you need to calm down and then review the choice you made before." Sun Lang was silent for a moment. "He didn't say that. I said it to him." The atmosphere between the two became silent. The conversation died again. No matter what kind of situation they were in, no matter what kind of mood they were in, Sun Lang and Xin Yaohua would always have one person between them. This was a thick barrier that they could never ignore. Xin Yaohua's eyes reddened. Sun Lang whispered, "I'm sorry." The widowed Miss Shun gently shook her head. "It's all right. God knows what Sun Lang was apologizing for. God knows what Xin Yaohua was forgiving for." The two stood foolishly in the night wind for a while. Xin Yaohua took the initiative to change the topic. "About Sir Bao, is it all right?" The expression in Sun Lang's eyes changed slightly. An indescribable feeling rose in his heart. He had returned to the capital alone. His old friends and former subordinates had all gathered. Every day at the Copper Sparrow Terrace was very lively. In the court and in the capital, he had a battle of wits and courage with the royalists and opposers. The emperor, empress, and his old rivals took turns to fight. Not only did it allow the young Shunsei general to relive his old dreams, it also brought him innumerable joy. His days back in the capital were very fulfilling. It even reminded him of his honeymoon period with the court. But what was different from that time was he had no one to talk to in the capital. There were many people who could share his happiness, but no one could share his hidden worries and secrets. What he brought back to the capital was not only deep hatred, but also secrets that could overturn the entire country. These secrets gave rise to many schemes and arrangements. Outsiders who did not know the truth could not understand. From beginning to end, Sun Lang was a lonely player. In order to defeat the emperor, in order to win this game, in order to take revenge, in order to leave a stable world for the people he cared about, he used some dishonest methods. For example, secretly killing Qi Lianyan, framing the Copper Sparrow Terrace as a secret stronghold of the extraterritorial sky demon, and framing the so-called National Sword Sage as a scapegoat tonight, and many, many more. Although these methods were just not upright, at least they were much more honest than the emperor's methods. Kind people had to be more ruthless than evil people. Only in this way could they protect themselves. Bright people had to use dark methods to fight back against the darkness. Only in this way could they not be swallowed by the darkness. It was a perfect logic. Moreover, he was a soldier. On the battlefield, he had to be unscrupulous. It was important to know that all wars were cunning. He had to use any method he could think of to weaken the enemy, because if he did not do so, the enemy would do so. He had always felt that there was nothing wrong with his methods. Until tonight, when he saw Bao Shiren's eyes, which were mixed with disappointment and loneliness. This gaze made Sun Lang very uncomfortable, even though Bao Shiren did not say anything. Then he felt irritated. His emotions were surging, and he could not calm down. He longed to communicate with others, longed to tell others that he had encountered an inexplicable incident tonight. A guy from the lawful and good camp had gone crazy for no reason, which made him, a guy who prided himself on being neutral and evil, feel somewhat unhappy. However, who could he confide in? No one. Ping Yang would only say, "Yes, master." Android and the others would only slap the table and shout, "Bao Haizi is a stinking idiot, purebred." Even Pongji and the other smart people probably could not figure out where the knot in Sun Lang's heart was. It seemed that the candidate had already been decided, right? The person to confide in. Sun Lang took a deep breath and said softly, "Tonight, Bao Haizi should be the one who suffered the most." He scolded 2 people, but everyone thought that he was crazy. Even he thought that he was crazy. Xin Yaohua listened quietly. As for the first person, he was not wrong. The emperor is a dictator, a schemer, a selfish and greedy madman, and a bastard who deserves to be hacked to death. Since ancient times, all the emperors have been like that. I have told him many times about the drawbacks and disgusting aspects of the monarchy. Today, he finally understood. These words were truly audacious. Even though it was just a private conversation between the 2 of them, Xin Yaohua was still greatly shocked by Sun Lang's audacity. Perhaps from ancient times until now, no one had dared to so fiercely make such a treacherous conclusion about the emperors of the human world who acted as herders for the heavens. She could not help but roll her beautiful eyes and stare at Sun Lang. What about the second person? Did he scold the wrong person? Sun Lang sighed. Probably I didn't scold the wrong person. He raised his head and looked at the sky. There was no fog in the capital, and the stars in the sky could be clearly seen. It could be seen that ancient times had some advantages. At least some stars could not be counted in a night. General Shunsei organized his words and slowly said, "Today's matter was a plot that I set up. This plot was purely a stroke of genius. Taking advantage of the situation, I counterattacked. Even if the emperor and his scheming were deep, it would be difficult for them to resist in a short period of time. I think the 2 of them are hiding in the palace in fear. I really want to see the emperor's twisted old face." He muttered to himself for a moment and then sighed. It's just that there was a little hiccup. Sun Lang simply leaned his back against the wall, and his tone became casual. "Bao Shiren, a smart person. He had long guessed my true identity. So he guessed that tonight's unforeseen event was a plot set up by me. Then he was shocked, he was disappointed, he was angry, he was sad. At this point, he turned his head to look at Shun Yaohua and smiled. Because I used underhanded methods, because I used crafty schemes, because my plan of framing others was too vicious, and the impact was too great, Shin Yaohua's expression was a little strange. She wanted to say something, but stopped. Sun Lang smiled. "It seems that you also understand. Bao Shiren's anger and disappointment are really too unreasonable. You say that I, a general of the imperial court who has been wronged and wants to seek justice, was really risking my life to fight against the Dark Emperor's forces step by step." He actually jumped out and said that I was too despicable. It's really easy to just sit and talk. Miss Shin didn't say anything. She just quietly listened to Sun Lang pour out his heart. The conclusion is that Bao Shiren is being unreasonable. Sun Lang said, "I know it in my heart. You know it in your heart. Android and the others also think this way, and Bao Shiren also thinks the same way. He also thinks that he is being unreasonable. He also thinks that he is being angry for no reason. So he just spat out a mouthful of blood, cursed loudly, and then collapsed. He didn't expose my plan. He just cursed me and the Emperor together, then closed his eyes and fainted." Sun Lang said to this point and laughed. "Really stupid, right?" Shen Yaohua sighed faintly. There is no perfect, incomparably bright thing in the world. Look at the history books. The scribes only have a few dozen strokes of words, but they have buried countless blood and slaughter. Who knows the bones and sinister smiles behind the heroes? Sun Lang said softly. So he wasn't wrong to curse. He previously believed that there were incomparably bright things in this world. This is my fault. It's me. I made him believe that I am still the me of the past. His eyes became dazed, and he said slowly, but many things have indeed changed. Commander of War Jia Ying is already dead. Now I am Shunsei General Sun Lang. He just stubbornly believes that I'm still the same me of the past, always bright, always righteous, always with a righteous heart, always compassionate for the world, always thinking of the weak. It was me who made him believe again. After we met again and opposed each other, I have been instilling in him an idea. The Emperor is making big news. The Emperor is doing bad things, and I want to stop him. I'm a partner of justice. I can protect this country. Although he doesn't believe it verbally, he slowly believes it in his heart. Shen Yaohua suddenly asked, then, is it really so? Sun Lang still looked at the sky, silent. After a while, the corner of his mouth moved. He said that I am selfish, only thinking about my own things, and not caring about the lives of others. I am thinking, is this true? What is the true motivation that drove me to return to the capital? I thought of Bai Yue's final request. I thought of Grandma's smile. I thought of Yin Luo and the others' smiling faces. And then I asked myself, did I come to seek justice for Bai Yue? Did I come to fulfill my promise to Grandma and cut off the knot in my heart? Did I come to live a carefree life with Yin Luo and the others? These goals are all there, but they're not all, and they're not even the most important. Because I asked myself again, did I come for revenge? The answer is unprecedentedly certain. Sun Lang's steady tone even trembled a little. Even with the ability of a peerless warrior to control himself, he could not suppress this slight tremor. He said, yes, revenge. I came for revenge. Without a doubt. All the pain, all the everything, I was forced to leave my family and my world forever. The initial pain and torment, as well as the unforgettable hatred in the great desolate mountain, the raging fury that could not be extinguished even after thousands of years, and everything that I had experienced. I swore to let them have a taste of what I had experienced. Shen Yaohua was a little uneasy. Sun Lang closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The ferocious, bloody light in the depths of his eyes gradually dissipated, but his words were still full of danger. He smiled somewhat sorrowfully. So I assumed another environment for myself. If there was a button in front of me and I pressed it, the Emperor and his enemies would be tortured to death, but this country would also be torn apart, the flames of war burning. Countless people would die because of this, but the people I care about would not be included. And if I did not press it, I would forever lose the opportunity to take revenge on them. Then, how should I choose? Sun Lang continued to smile. I think I already have the answer. So, Bao Shiren was not wrong in his scolding. Everything I have done so far, whether it was causing havoc at the Copper Sparrow Terrace, forcing Qi Lianyan to his death, or the several heated debates and schemes in the imperial court, and the promises I made to Bao Shiren, they were all lies. From beginning to end, I placed revenge first. I said that I would invite his master to take charge of the imperial court to reduce the unrest, but it was only a method to rope in powerful allies. If Marquis Wu insisted on keeping the emperor alive, I would most likely cut him down as well, so Shen Yaohua's words interrupted Sun Lang's narration. General Shinsei blinked and looked at Shen Yaohua. He was in the middle of speaking enthusiastically when he was suddenly interrupted, so he was somewhat bewildered. This kind of revealing his inner thoughts, the feeling of denying justice, was indeed a little refreshing. I'm asking, you discovered the true thoughts in your heart, so what? Shen Yaohua asked. Then what do you want to do? Why don't you just face your true self and throw away all the pretenses and excuses? With revenge as your only goal, you don't care about any collateral damage or consequences. Do you want to kill everyone you want to kill as quickly as possible and destroy everything that stands in your way. In front of Shen Yaohua, Sun Lang's mind was somewhat numb. Hearing the other's rare harsh words, he nodded in a daze. Miss Shen leaned to the side and made a path. Over there is the Imperial Palace, please. Chapter 1019. Under the moonlight, the woman made way for him. Please go ahead. That was what she said. It was a simple word, but it was the most serious instigation in the world. Instigation a person to kill the emperor. Sun Lang looked at her calmly. After a while, General Shinsei nodded. Okay. He started to walk away. His footsteps were steady, and the wind blew under his feet. He moved forward with indomitable will toward the palace. He was going to kill, take revenge, and end everything without a trace of hesitation. His back was filled with endless fighting spirit, and he was so strong and firm that he could carry an entire train station. However, after a few steps, he slowed down. Slowly, he stopped completely. Finally, he turned back with some dissatisfaction. Shen Yaohua stood there and looked at him quietly, as if she had seen through everything. Sun Lang rolled his eyes. Give me some face. Miss Shen didn't give him any face at all. Instead, she fanned the flames. Look, you don't dare. Sun Lang felt that he had lost a lot of face. He was furious and said, Nonsense. I'm super brave. In order to prove this point, General Shinsei gathered chi in his dantian and roared in the direction of the palace. Hey, Mr. Li, you're just a fucking little biscuit. The sound waves swept across like a thunderclap. The taunts and insults were like angry waves, rushing all the way to the imperial city. Just by looking at the momentum, the entire imperial city might be able to hear the angry rebuke. Perhaps the tiles of many palaces would be shaken to the point of rustling. Fierce, super fierce. Sun Lang snorted proudly. Hoodoo had lived for thousands of years, and there were countless heroes in every generation. But to count the heroes, you had to look at the present. Not to mention other things. After Mr. Sun returned to the capital, he broke all kinds of world records at a crazy speed. Who dared to roar in the palace and insult the emperor in the middle of the night? In the past thousands of years, General Shinsei was the first person to call the emperor a little biscuit. He was super brave. He glanced at Shen Yaohua complacently. Shen Yaohua said calmly, Go kill them. Don't you want revenge? Sun Lang said angrily, Hey, be reasonable. How can it be so easy? It's easy to kill the emperor, but there's still that old bastard who hasn't died for 1,000 years. If he escapes, then there'll be no end of trouble. He counted on his fingers and said, Secondly, after killing the emperor, who will be the new emperor? When not prepared at all, if there's an explosion in the imperial court, there might be a coup d'etat. Everyone can just grab their weapons and start filming. Shen Yaohua said lightly, Aren't you very concerned about this country? Sun Lang glared and said, Nonsense. What does this country have to do with me? Why should I care about it? I just think it's troublesome. If I don't handle it well, I might become a traitor who kills the king and implicates my friends. I can't cause them so much trouble. Miss Shen said again, Look, aren't you very concerned about your friends? Sun Lang said angrily, That's not the same thing, okay? Shen Yaohua wanted to get to the bottom of this, so she asked, Then what exactly is this? Sun Lang even regretted coming to the appointment. Ever since he started using his stage name, Jia Ying, he had been famous for his eloquence. He had once lectured on classical martial arts in the army, told adult jokes to his comrades, flirted with decent women, scolded pedantic old scholars, called them idiots, and insulted the mentally retarded. His eloquence had been maxed out. He had even reached the demonic realm of persuading monks to go to sea and coaxing decent people to return to the secular world. But in front of Shen Yaohua, he quickly turned into a weak chicken. His usual cheerful and witty manner was completely gone. In front of Shen Yaohua, his hands and feet were tied. He couldn't joke around, couldn't use dirty words, and couldn't even speak fluently. It could be said that it was very embarrassing. He felt a little embarrassed, but there was nothing he could do. After rolling his eyes a few times, he said resentfully, Forget it, forget it. That's it. Whatever. After saying that, he wanted to run away. Shen Yaohua's figure flashed and blocked Sun Lang. She said seriously, "Aren't you going to solve the problem?" Sun Lang said impatiently, "Actually, it's not a problem. It's just that Bao Shiren is a little pretentious, and it infected me and made me pretentious. Actually, it's nothing. No matter what the motive is, my goal is the same. No matter what, I want to kill the emperor no matter what. So there's no point in arguing about this." Shen Yaohua shook her head and said, "No, there's a point." She lowered her eyes and whispered, "My late husband once said, 'A just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support,'" Sun Lang said faintly. "The person who said this is called Meng Ke. I heard it when I was young." And then he didn't continue. Shen Yaohua didn't say anything. The conversation was dead again. After a while, Miss Shen whispered, "Since you know this, it's great. A just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support. This is very reasonable," Sun Lang said indifferently. "It sounds very reasonable. But is that really the case?" "I'm afraid not. The person who said this is called Meng Ke. He wrote an article to prove this point. As for the purpose, it was to advise the warring princes to pay attention to their morals and to know what's in their hearts." Of course, the words of a quasi-sage sound good, but how far is the gap between books and reality? The affairs of the world are impermanent, and people's hearts change. It's not something that can be explained in a few words. He looked at the palace and said meaningfully, "I've seen a cruel and vicious person who used leather whips and torture to control his subordinates. People all obeyed him fearfully. At this time, a kind and righteous person stood out to resist him. What would the people who were oppressed and bullied choose? Would they join the resistance team? No, most of the time, that's not the case. They would rather continue to suffer under the whips than stand up and fight. Because it's very painful to be whipped, but if they resist, they will die. Many people think that a bad life is better than a good death." Speaking of this, Sun Lang smiled coldly. "However, the most important point is they know that if they resist the cruel and vicious bad guys, they will be killed by them without hesitation. But if they stand against the kind and righteous people, they don't have to worry about being executed or punished by them, because they're the companions of the kind and righteous people." He spread out his hands to show his helplessness. He had experienced so many things in the past 8 years. His worldview had been reshaped and distorted by the cruel blood and fire. He was no longer the naive teenager he was then. A just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support. It was just a slogan that he used to shout. Sun Lang came to a conclusion. As the saying goes, a just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support. It's better to say that the strong enjoy abundant support, while the weak enjoy little support. Why was the big bad guy defeated? It's because the big bad guy was too pretentious. He made himself weak and gave the companions of the righteous a chance to become stronger. This led to his defeat. An unjust cause finds little support. Naturally, this is also the reason. Weakness is the original sin. If you're weak, you'll be beaten. Shen Yaohua suddenly interrupted and asked, "So now you're the stronger one, right?" Sun Lang was tongue-tied again. Shen Yaohua continued, "According to your logic, it's not that a just cause enjoys abundant support, but that the strong enjoy abundant support. Now you're the stronger one. So why don't you accept more people to rely on and help you?" Sun Lang felt a little dizzy. This woman didn't seem to play her cards according to common sense. Wait a minute. I'm a little dizzy. What was our argument again? I keep feeling that there's something wrong. That's right. Shen Yaohua said, "Regardless of whether the strong enjoy abundant support or the just cause enjoy abundant support, it's essentially the same. The just cause represents justice. The strong and righteous can defeat evil and rebuild order. Those who desire stability and benefits will follow. This is also a natural principle, right?" Sun Lang nodded with a dumbfounded expression. Shen Yaohua smiled. "Since you're the strong and represent justice, why is Master Bao still angry, vomiting blood, and feeling disappointed?" Sun Lang's expression changed from Wang Dachui to little Yu Yu. Miss Shun continued. The principal is correct, but there's a mistake. It must be because you didn't do well enough. Is it because you're not strong enough? Or because you're not righteous enough? Judging from how you roared at the Imperial City just now, you're indeed the stronger one. Then there's a conclusion. You're not righteous enough. Sun Lang felt that he couldn't listen to her anymore. He was inexplicably led by the nose by this woman. If this spread out, his reputation as the love saint and the elegant young master in the chaotic world would suffer a great blow. He took a step back and said, "Yes, I'm not righteous enough. This problem goes back to the beginning. Bao Shiren was right. I didn't have good intentions. I'm not a partner of justice," Shen Yaohua said softly. "Then why not be more righteous?" Sun Lang said subconsciously, "I'm not stupid. Justice was a joke. Heroes did not have a good death." The history books, his personal experience, everything he had seen and experienced were all reminding Sun Lang deeply, reminding him of the truth and cruelty of this world. Sun Lang was no longer the commander of war, Jiang, just like every teenager would eventually grow up and no longer believe in justice and heroes without hesitation like before. But Shun Yaohua said softly, "But in this world, there are still heroes." Sun Lang was silent. What Master Bao wants to see is a hero. I believe that Master Bao is not the only one looking forward to it. Many people are looking forward to a hero. Miss Shun said softly, "Everyone yearns for a hero when they are young. When they grow up, this yearning doesn't disappear. It's buried in the heart. The reason why it's buried in the heart is not because they don't believe in it, but because they have recognized the reality. They know that heroes are not everywhere. They know that heroes are precious and great. That's why there are few heroes and heroes are not common." She said softly but firmly, "So, can you respond to people's expectations more? I think you will definitely receive unexpected support and surprise." Sun Lang's expression was somewhat tangled, and his brows furrowed. He frowned and looked a little impatient. Shen Yaohua said apologetically, "I'm sorry. I don't usually talk, and I'm not good at persuading people. After all, I'm just a woman. I just learned some words from books and figured out some things on my own. It must be ridiculous to use them to persuade people." Sun Lang said calmly, "It's okay." Shen Yaohua sighed softly. "I just think, if there's a chance to become a hero and stand in the light, why would you stay in the dark?" Sun Lang said woodenly, "I will think about it." Shen Yaohua's eyes lit up. She said softly, "Why don't you visit Master Bao?" Sun Lang looked at her. "Don't push your luck." She blinked mischievously and smiled a little embarrassedly. It was a little cute. Even the atmosphere became a little ambiguous. But when their eyes met, they quickly looked away. After a while, Shen Yaohua said, "Master Bao's injury, maybe I can help?" Sun Lang nodded. "If you want to go, then go. You are familiar with Canaan and can talk to her. If you ask for treatment, she won't refuse." Shen Yaohua heard this and glared at Sun Lang. Sun Lang was puzzled. "Isn't it? Is your relationship with Nan not that good? Plastic sisters?" That day she clearly... Miss Shun sighed. "Forget it. It's getting late. I should go back." Sun Lang nodded. "It's indeed getting late. I have to go back and make some arrangements. Then goodbye." Miss Shun, who was as gentle and virtuous as a water lotus, even had the urge to grind her teeth. Fortunately, Sun Lang was not that stupid. As a martial artist, his strong spiritual sense made him acutely aware of the murderous aura coming from Shen Yaohua. After looking over in surprise, he took a full 3 seconds to figure out the situation. He still had this level of common sense. "I'll send you back." Shen Yaohua snorted. "I don't want to trouble you, General. After all, my martial arts are strong and tyrannical. Even if I walk home alone at night, I don't have to worry about my safety. Moreover, I took the initiative to come out and meddle in your business. You still have a lot of important things to do, so how can I take up your time?" What about Sun Lang? What could Sun Lang do? He was also very desperate. He could only smile awkwardly and politely. Then he shyly followed Shen Yaohua all the way back home. Rather than an escort, it would be better to say that he was tailing her. because Miss Chun was a bit angry. She only cared about walking on her own and didn't pay attention to Sun Lang, who was behind her. Sun Lang also didn't know what to say. In front of this woman, he became clumsy and didn't know what to say. After all, he couldn't talk dirty, and he was embarrassed to say any nonsense. He also couldn't be sexually harassing. Then he found that he didn't know how to talk. Hateful. Shen Yaohua didn't stop until she was close to the Shun family's house. Sun Lang stood not far behind her, looking very serious. Young Lady Shen burst out laughing. She sighed and shook her head. She walked in front of Sun Lang. Sun Lang quietly took a step back. Shen Yaohua glared at him and finally smiled. "Thank you for sending me back." "Are you thanking me or mocking me?" Shen Yaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Give me your hand." Sun Lang looked at her smile and raised his right hand as if he was possessed. Then Shen Yaohua's hand covered it. The water resonated and built a bridge. The magical power wandered and vibrated, guiding and changing. After a while, Shen Yaohua let go of her hand. "It's thanking you, so this is a reward." She reached out and tapped the tip of Sun Lang's nose, smiling. "You can go back to the Copper Sparrow Pavilion now and have fun. The best girls in the capital are 3 different kinds in one night." After saying that, the woman went away like a fairy. The pitiful Divine Strategies General was left standing on the spot with question marks all over his face. Chapter 1020. When Shen Yaohua leaped over the wall of the Shun residence, Sun Lang was still standing there in a daze. He was like a shocked 90-years-old single man. The eldest daughter of the Shun family glanced at Sun Lang one last time, and then her figure disappeared. Only a faint fragrance remained in the air. Then Sun Lang slowly raised his head. The woman who made him feel uneasy was already far away, and the initial daze and confusion had gradually dissipated. The normal Sun Lang had returned. This battle-hardened man was good at self-deprecating, had a clear mind, was very good at associating, and had a wealth of theoretical knowledge, and was extremely paranoid. The kind of paranoid that almost did not trust anyone. Sun Lang was somewhat incredulous and muttered to himself, "Was she flirting with me?" Looking at the wall of the Shun residence, General Shin's eyes became deep and serene. The surroundings were quiet, with only the occasional sound of insects. In any case, this was a mansion of a wealthy family. The surroundings were quiet, and the world was silent. It was as if the incident at the Jupiter Sword Palace had not affected this place at all. Between heaven and earth, under the bright moon, the most valuable golden bachelor in the world fell into deep thought. She flirted with me for what? Why did she say those words? What was her intention? It doesn't make sense unless... Therefore, Sun Lang was very clear in his mind. If an ordinary person discovered that a beautiful woman had done something slightly intimate to him or said something strange to him, he would have been wild with joy and automatically filled in a large number of scenarios. He would have even thought of the name of his great-grandson in 3 seconds. Although General Shansei usually considered himself a Casanova, had the Q attribute, and was good at psychological tactics when it came to serious matters, he was very calm and rational. For example, now, when he was thinking about Shen Yaohua's strange behavior, he automatically eliminated the idea of whether she was interested in me or not. He did not even think about it. It was impossible to be liked. In this life, no girl would like him. He did not have the courage to chase a girl. He could only play with paper dolls and call her wife a few times to make up for the emptiness and loneliness in his heart. He could only hypnotize himself that someone wanted him. This was probably what it was like. This was the true record of a 21st century single. Therefore, what does she want to do? Sun Lang's eyes flickered with a faint light. He was an extremely paranoid person and would subconsciously suspect anyone. Abnormal behavior, strange words and actions. Why would you do that? And it's a little obvious, and her technique is a little rough. She doesn't know that I'm a virgin, so how could she deal with it like this? Could it be that she's hinting at something? No, it's not a hint. There are no outsiders just now. My side is the safest place in the world. She can just say whatever she wants, but if it's not a hint, he quietly clenched his fists and closed his eyes. Coldness spread from the bottom of his heart. Then he opened his eyes and looked at the Shun residence. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. However, this sharpness was quickly replaced by hesitation. Sun Lang had always done things swiftly and decisively, but there were occasional exceptions. The woman living in this house was an exception due to her special identity. Facing her, Sun Lang would always think of many things. In the end, he shook his head and turned to leave. Forget it, let's wait and see. General Shunsei, who was walking alone in the night, pursed his lips slightly and was expressionless. He thought of someone, an old friend that he hadn't seen for a long time. You know, I'm not good at dealing with women. I've told you before, I'm an egalitarian. Sun Lang muttered to himself. His voice was so soft that only he could hear it. However, perhaps in the unseen world, there was a dead soul that could hear it. He said, the so-called egalitarian is someone who insists on the equality of men and women. There's no discrimination between men and women. I'm such a person. You know, I've always treated men and women equally. I've never worn a pair of colored glasses to kill women. Yes, men and women are equal. They're born equal, and they'll die equal. Your wife is also a woman. So, I'm really not good at dealing with women. I'm used to treating men and women as humans. Everyone is equal, and we're all humans. If I really want to divide them, I can only divide them into the living and the dead. Anyway, that's what I'm used to. But she's your wife. So, I could be a little more patient. I'll wait and see. For the time being, I won't make the first move. I'll investigate. Perhaps I'll choose to ignore some things. I'll use the best of my ability to speculate about your wife, including why she appeared at the Jupiter Sword Palace tonight, why she stopped me, why she said those things to me, and why she said those things to me in the end. I could try to think of these things from a positive perspective. General Shunsei muttered to himself like a madman. He looked at the night sky and tried to find Mercury. Unfortunately, his astronomical knowledge wasn't very good. The astronomical phenomena of this world were far more complicated and magnificent than those of Earth, so he couldn't find it. But it didn't matter. It was in the sky after all. I remember when we were chatting and bragging. I told you that your wife must not be smart. At worst, you must find someone who knows how to show off that she's smart. At worst, you found a smart wife who knows how to play dumb. You just laughed. When I asked if your wife was smart, you always laughed but didn't say anything. Sun Lang stopped in his tracks and let out a long sigh. But right now, I sincerely hope that your wife is stupid. She must not be smart. She must not think of herself as smart. She must not like to play dumb. Otherwise, he was silent for a moment and continued walking. Otherwise, I can only let you down once more. At the Shin residence. With Shun Yaohua's martial arts, it was enough to avoid everyone's eyes and ears and return to her embroidery tower. She was very familiar with everything in the house. She climbed up to the second floor without any lights. Even in the pitch-black night, everything was clear in her eyes. This was the exceptional eyesight of a martial arts expert. In the darkness, Shun Yaohua's footsteps were light. She did not make any sound. She came to the bedside and slowly sat down. Her beautiful face did not have any expression. She just sat there in a daze, not saying a word. Her heart was fiercely surging, turbulent, and for a long time she could not calm down. After an unknown period of time, 2 clear lines of tears quietly rolled down from her eyes. The young widow closed her eyes. Her hands slowly moved in the soft bedding. Finally, she grabbed something and took it out. That thing was only a vague outline in the darkness. But Shin Yaohua was very familiar with this thing. In these 2 years, she had always hugged this thing to sleep. This was the sustenance of her heart. This was an unresolvable obsession. Before she completed this matter, she could not let it go. It was a memorial tablet. Shin Yaohua hugged this memorial tablet in her arms and slowly cried. Her tears fell drop by drop. She tightly hugged the memorial tablet in her arms. From it, she drew strength and strength. She softly said, "It's really very difficult." And Sun Lang once again went to the capital government. The family quarters of the city hall were really busy. Many of the bailiffs who were not on duty were woken up by their companions. Pairs of worried eyes looked at the courtyard where Lord Bao lived. Kunan and Di Huaying were busy inside, while Song Huifu was keeping watch in the courtyard. The four bodyguards were holding onto their swords and sabers, vigilantly looking around. Many bailiffs were consciously guarding the surroundings. Sun Lang looked at this scene, and his heart was slightly moved. Bao Heizi was a hothead. He clearly did not know how to conduct himself. For this kind of person to be an official, his subordinates would be disgusted, his superiors would be disgusted, and his colleagues would be tired of him. After all, he did not know how to conduct himself. When others were greedy, he did not want to be greedy. Not only did he not want to be greedy, he did not allow others to be greedy. This kind of idiot would be isolated and ostracized. The reason why he could become the capital government's governor, in the eyes of Sun Lang and many other smart people, was completely because of the protection of the Marquis and the favor of the Emperor. Of course, the Emperor did not have good intentions. He only wanted to set up Bao Shiren as an example of an honest and capable official. He wanted to use Bao Shiren to provoke the natural opposition between the civil officials and the influential officials. It was just a political move. It was originally like this. But Sun Lang saw the bailiffs and officials who volunteered to stand guard at night. Their positions were high and low, and their titles were also very different. Some of them were even disheveled. It was obvious that they had just climbed out of bed, but there was almost no irritation or impatience on their faces. There was also no joy. They looked at Bao Shiren's residence with eyes full of worry and concern. Originally, when an overly upright and old-fashioned superior fell ill and fell into a coma, many people should be clapping their hands and celebrating. After all, he was an official who did not know the ways of the world. He was strict and controlled too much. He did not allow anyone to be greedy or take anything. Moreover, he still stood tall in the imperial court. It was really infuriating. Who knew how much money he had ruined? Now that he was sick and in a coma, there were even signs of him leaving his post due to illness. Everyone should be happy, but there was no such thing. Everyone's expression was not relaxed. Perhaps Bao Shiren had been subtly influencing them all these years. Sun Lang's mind suddenly flashed with Shun Yaohua's words. People were looking forward to heroes. If Bao Shiren's matter was spread out, there would be many people burning incense and praying for him. He could not help but think of something from his previous life. In the museum of Kaifeng City, there was a stone tablet called Kaifeng Magistrate's Inscription Tablet. This stone tablet had been erected in the Kaifeng Magistrate's office before. The names of 183 magistrates of Kaifeng in the northern Song dynasty were engraved on the tablet. Bao Zheng, who had been the magistrate of Kaifeng, should have been among them. But his name was not on the tablet. There was only a deep dent. Bao Zheng's name had been erased from the tablet. But the person who erased the tablet was not a treacherous official or an incapable ruler. It was people from generation to generation. For thousands of years, everyone who saw this tablet would find Bao Zheng's name, and then they could not help but touch, reminisce, and admire. Over time, the hard stone tablet was touched by people's fingers, and Bao Zheng's name was gradually rubbed away. Some things could not be erased by time. They were rooted in everyone's heart and engraved on civilization for a long time. However, when Sun Lang looked at these people, a malicious thought suddenly appeared in his mind. If they knew that Bao Shiren had cursed in the Star Sword Palace, what kind of expression would they have? But he was immediately awakened by this thought. He bitterly smiled and flicked his forehead. I've probably been broken long ago, he thought, but they probably would not have the chance to know. Bao Shiren had roared in the Star Sword Palace and said some treasonous words. At the time, the people in the Star Sword Palace had heard it clearly. The Emperor would certainly know it clearly. But whether the world could know or not depended on whether the Emperor wanted the world to know. As long as the Emperor did not want the world to know, then this matter was a rumor and did not exist. The Emperor, of course, did not want it. Sun Lang's lips curled into a smile. He did not know whether or not Ling Mu Li's appearance in the Star Sword Palace was a conspiracy between the devil and the Emperor. If it was really the devil acting on his own, then there would be fun to watch. And no matter what, the emperor should feel fear in his heart. Because at that time, if he really did not care and gathered all the officials into the palace to confront him, then the matter would most likely not end well. After all, the sword saint no longer existed, and the emperor wanted to fabricate a flawless lie in front of Sun Lang. So, no matter how furious the emperor was, he could only swallow it down. The matter of the sword saint had already become the emperor's Achilles heel, and he had to mend the pen after the sheep had been lost. So, he would most likely settle down for a period of time. Only, Sun Lang took one last look at Bao Shiren's room. From now on, you are on the emperor's blacklist, and Marquis will most likely be remembered by the emperor. I said earlier, you should not get involved in these matters. He allowed a soft sigh. His figure flashed, disappearing into the darkness. With a light sound, a man dressed in night clothes was lifted up by his neck and slammed into a wall. There was not the slightest sound, because all the force of the collision remained in the man's body, without the slightest bit dissipating. The man's eyes bulged, and in an instant his entire body was as red as blood, revealing an expression of extreme pain. Sun Lang tilted his head to look at him, and said indifferently, I said in front of the Sword Palace, do not disturb Bao He Zi's recuperation. Since you did not listen to me, then you are in the wrong. The man's eyes revealed extreme shock and fear, evidently having recognized Sun Lang. Sun Lang patted his face and said amiably, May I ask, who do you follow? The man's body trembled slightly, and his eyes revealed a pleading look. You don't like to talk, right? Sun Lang said softly, No problem. I am good at chatting with people. Let's talk slowly. Which bone of yours should we start with? Speaking here, he stopped. Suddenly, his interest waned. Bao Shiren's room was not far away, and the soft feeling in his hands had not completely disappeared. The words that Shin Yaohua had said to him still lingered in his ears. It was a little annoying. He put down the man, and with a light pat, the man's pain disappeared, and he regained his ability to move. Scram, he said. Tell your boss, he is lucky. I am a vegetarian today. Chapter 10:21. The waves caused by the time Star Sword Palace were still fermenting. There was no way around it. It couldn't be hidden at all. The main reason was that Sun Lang and the Devil, those great llamas of the All Channel, were really too flashy. Doing this kind of action in the imperial capital, where undercurrents were surging, was no different from buying a trending topic. Countless people woke up from their sleep, put on their clothes, and began to gather their officials and subordinates to arrange for an investigation. Because the amount of information contained in those few keywords was really too great. At such a delicate juncture, it was very important to get first-hand information as early as possible. Important information would allow one to make the right choice. This was related to the wealth, and even the lives of hundreds and thousands of people. And Tensei Province was naturally actively investigating and operating. When it came to Sun Lang, every matter had to be treated as if they were facing a great enemy, and they had to go all out. This was almost the consensus of Tensei Province, because the Tensei officials knew that commander of war, who was incomparably close to their own general and might even marry Her Highness, was already standing on the opposite side of Empress. The intimacy and tacit understanding they once had when they fought side by side had disappeared without a trace. All that was left was unforgettable hatred and endless hostility. Even if Sun Lang had once confessed his love to General Tensei in front of all the civil and military officials of the imperial court, even if Sun Lang had once hinted on various occasions that he was still having an affair with Empress Tensei, even if many people had been deceived by Sun Lang. But the Tensei officials had long seen through everything. This was obviously that shameless person's plot and strategy. Not to mention other things. When this bastard had just returned to the capital, he had broken into Tensei Province and beaten everyone up. What kind of mother asterisk king love was this? What kind of mother asterisk king affair was this? As a result, Tensei Province was still brightly lit that night. Although the officials of Tensei, lived in their own homes, they all heard the broadcast. Based on the tacit understanding and habit of being subordinate to the Empress for a long time, they set off to Tensei province without waiting for His Highness' summons. Now, all of them had gathered in the Tensei palace and were waiting for the news from the scouts. The Empress had already woken up and combed herself. Because it was nighttime, she did not wear armor or martial attire. Instead, she wore a woman's robe that she usually wore. The style of the robe was personally designed and sewn by the famous tailors of Tensei province. It was tailor-made for His Highness. Not only did it completely set off the grandeur of a famous general of Tianyuan Empire and the nobility of the Imperial Empress, it also had no lack of feminine charm. Now, the general of Tensei was sitting upright in the main seat of the palace. She did not wear any makeup, and her eyes were cold. She had a dignified and noble temperament that made people admire her and involuntarily want to submit to her. It seemed that if this woman changed her clothes into a dragon robe, it would not feel out of place at all. She was Empress Tensei, the most famous and most powerful woman in the world. After pondering for a moment, she slowly asked, "Is there still no news?" Zhang Sun Wuji was in charge of this matter. He walked out quickly and came back after a while with a difficult expression. He bowed to the Empress and said, "Your Highness, please forgive us. We are incompetent and have not been able to find out any useful news." The Empress raised her chin slightly and said the reason. She was not an unreasonable general. Compared to the other generals in the court, she was more patient and would listen to the opinions and views of some officials. She would even give the losers a chance to explain. This was because Jia Ying had told her some things more than once. Failure does not need an excuse. Losers do not need a reason. This kind of line that sounds very domineering is actually very stupid. People who say this are undoubtedly idiots. I will beat them up whenever I see them. Be reasonable. You're the one who gives orders and dispatches your subordinates. The lackey you sent out failed. It's not only the lackey's failure, it's also your incompetence as the commander. He only weighs 3 caddies. You asked him to do a job that weighs 5 caddies. Aren't you forcing him to do something he can't do? He screwed up, and you are not willing. You even said that failure does not need a reason. Aren't you despicable? Boss, people's hearts are about to break. And he weighs 3 kilograms. You asked him to do a job that weighs 1 kilogram. If he screwed up, as the commander, the first thing you have to do is to figure out if you are responsible for it. For example, if the job suddenly changed from 1 kilogram to 5 kilograms, then brother 3 kilograms will be wronged. You have to investigate this first. If brother 3 kilograms really screwed up, it will not be too late for you to punish him. This is called having reason and evidence. Hey, I am kindly telling you some life principles, but you actually think I'm long-winded. You have no conscience. I'm not long-winded. This is a valuable experience that I have learned from countless failed villains. Do you know how many villains have died because of idiocy? In the beginning, before the main character grew up, he sent some lackeys to mess with him. The main character went berserk and defeated the lackeys, and the lackeys went back to report. Say, the loser did not have a reason. He killed the lackeys with a sword, and then sent stronger lackeys to fight him. He did not consider why the lackeys screwed up, nor did he consider why the main character killed the lackeys. He just worked hard and gave the main character experience and equipment. Sometimes he even gave women to him. In the end, he was killed himself. Don't you think it's unfair? So, do you remember? In the future, if your subordinates can't do a good job, don't get angry. First, suppress your anger and ask him how he did it. This way, you won't be killed by the righteous main character. Hey, I'm just saying, I didn't say that you were a villain. If you're a villain, then what am I? It was probably this kind of idiotic conversation. Many things happened. Some were serious matters, some were jokes, and some were not even clear whether they were serious matters or jokes. But it was not important anymore. Empress inwardly sighed. It's really as you said. In your story, in your life, I have become a villain. You want to kill me, and I want to do the same. Meanwhile, Zhang Sun Wuji reported, after that extremely loud sound transmission was transmitted, This subordinate immediately dispatched elite spies to the Time Starsword Palace. However, due to Sun Lang's tyrannical might, the spies did not dare to get too close. Moreover, at almost the same time, the soldiers under Sun Lang's command had already arrived at the Sword Palace to set up a defensive line. They had been trained by Sun Lang for a long time and were extremely proficient in counter-reconnaissance. Our spies could only retreat. Ho Junji harumphed. Sun Lang's old subordinates have openly gathered an army and occupied the Copper Sparrow Terrace for a long time. The imperial capital now has an elite army that obeys the orders of a great general. If it were any other great general, 10 heads would have already been chopped off. Could it be that the officials of the imperial court are just going to let this happen? Li Jing glanced at Empress and softly said, "The heavyweights of the imperial court do not wish to meddle. After all, everyone has seen what has happened in the past few days. Sun Lang is a piece of sticky candy that can't be broken or shaken off. If we want to deal with him, we have to be prepared to be bullied." Of course, there was one more thing that he didn't say. Most importantly, the emperor did not wish to meddle in this matter. But why did His Majesty turn a blind eye to this? Li Jing was a smart man, and smart people all had a bad habit. They liked to think. When they encountered something they didn't understand, they couldn't stop themselves from remembering it and had to figure it out. The imperial capital was under the feet of the Son of Heaven, where the imperial city was located. Imperial power had always been at its height, and security had always been tight. Sun Lang was a foreign great general, and he was also a traitor and a great general of the imperial court whose identity was almost publicly known. He had an extremely high reputation and prestige, and yet his old subordinates were openly garrisoned at the Copper Sparrow Terrace. Worst of all, since those ruffians had dared to attack the Copper Sparrow Terrace, they might have even dared to attack the Imperial Palace. So the question was, why was His Majesty turning a blind eye to this? Was His Majesty so relaxed? No, His Majesty was not a broad-minded person. Moreover, even the most broad-minded, benevolent, and weak sovereign would not permit such a thing to happen, right? But His Majesty, who was a wise sovereign, had tacitly approved of this matter. After thinking it over, there was only one possibility. His Majesty did not believe that the soldiers at the Copper Sparrow Terrace were a fatal or serious threat. So the question was, why did His Majesty feel that an army that was not far from the Imperial Palace and whose loyalty could not be guaranteed did not pose much of a threat? There was only one answer. There was someone who was more threatening than this entire army watching from the side. Sun Lang. Thinking of this, Li Jing felt a chill in his heart. He could not help but feel a bit of fear. Did His Majesty think that Sun Lang alone was enough to seriously threaten him, to the point that Sun Lang's old subordinates were nothing compared to him? So His Majesty did not care about that army, and even tacitly approved of its existence. Was it so that he would not face Sun Lang head-on and make things worse? One person? How could one person do this? Zhang Sun Wuji's narration continued. After Sun Lang's soldiers guarded the surroundings, the messengers from the imperial city came twice. The first time was from the guards of the imperial palace, and the second time was from eunuch Feng Yongting. The time interval was very short. Feng Qiao's eyes flickered, and she whispered, "His Majesty seems very anxious." Du Keming nodded. He directly said something that the Tensei officials did not dare to discuss before. At first, the voice said, "Ling Muli, you are actually still alive." If I remember correctly, the only person named Ling Muli was the Woodsword Saint who died in the battle at the Great Desolate Mountain. Let's not talk about who killed Ling Muli for now. Later, Sun Lang also joined in, and the Time Sword Palace became lively. The imperial city sent messengers twice to invite the two of them into the palace. He glanced at Zhang Sun Wuji, and Zhang Sun Wuji understood. The capital magistrate who arrived later left first, followed by Sun Lang's group. Eunuch Feng Yongting stayed in the Time Sword Palace for quite a while. Sun Lang did not give His Majesty any face at all. Du Keming sneered, and Feng Yongting stayed in the Time Sword Palace and did not quickly report back. to dare to leave the emperor in the palace. It only means that he has more important things to do. It seems that many interesting things have happened in the Time Sword Palace, and eunuch Feng must stay behind to tell them to keep quiet. Silencing them is the best choice. Only the dead can keep secrets. Su Shiji said indifferently. Unfortunately, that is the Time Sword Palace, the holy land of the Sword Forest. Many people are watching, and even His Majesty does not dare to make a move. Therefore, Feng Yongting's measures to keep it a secret are meaningless. Should we think of a way to find out? What happened tonight must be very exciting. No, Feng Qiao rejected. Tonight's matter involves His Majesty, and the problem is very serious. Otherwise, His Majesty would not have sent two groups of people. If we think of a way to get in touch with the people of the Time Sword Palace and collect information, it will not be worth it if His Majesty finds out. Su Shiji said unhappily. But we must find out what happened. If Ling Mu Li really came back from the dead, there must be a huge conspiracy behind it. Now it seems that the Wood Sword Saint faked his death and hid his name, most likely because of His Majesty's instructions. Otherwise, he would not be so anxious. Finding out this matter may be very beneficial to His Majesty's great cause. Feng Qiao frowned, but Du Keming looked at Empress and asked directly, "Does His Majesty know about this?" Empress Tensei calmly shook his head, "No." Du Keming nodded. Since His Majesty said that he did not know, then he must not know. All the plans and arrangements regarding this matter must be carried out around this core. Brother Su is right. We must find out what happened. In any case, information is the most important. He glanced at Su Shiji and then said, "But if we investigate rashly and His Majesty knows about it, it will indeed cause His Majesty's dissatisfaction." Su Shiji frowned. "Don't try to smooth things over." Du Keming snorted and looked at Empress. "This is not difficult. His Majesty, please go to the palace immediately to meet His Majesty and openly ask about the cause and effect of this matter. See His Majesty's answer or reaction. This is filial piety and the duty of an official. No one can find fault with it." Empress was also a smart person. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Mr. Du is experienced in scheming." This was indeed the most suitable way to deal with the current situation. But when she thought of going to the palace to meet His Majesty, she felt some resistance in her heart. Perhaps Sun Lang's words and actions a few days ago had already stabbed a thorn in her heart. Perhaps she was born with the ruthlessness and suspicion of an emperor and did not even believe her own father. In short, some strange thoughts had already appeared in her heart. Because of the Wood Radiance Sword Saint, Empress's hands, which were hidden under his loose robe, suddenly clenched. The officials of Tensei were all waiting for Empress's decision, but the chief general still did not make up his mind. At this moment, the impatient Cheng Yaojin shook his head. He felt that this matter was very troublesome. Just hearing it made his head ache, let alone thinking about it. He muttered, "His Majesty is not present. If we have to talk about the person who knows the most, it has to be Sun Lang." Ho Junji rolled his eyes and said, "So what? Are we going to ask Sun Lang? Why would he say it? Even if he is willing to say it, we don't dare to go. Tangling with Sun Lang is more dangerous than secretly going to the Sword Palace to investigate the Wood Radiant Sword Saint. If His Majesty finds out, this matter will be too serious." Cheng Yaojin blinked. Some people's brain circuits were different from ordinary people, and they looked at problems from a different angle. Sometimes, they would come up with very creative ideas. He said in shock, "If that's the case, if Sun Lang comes here to spout nonsense and His Majesty finds out, won't this matter be terrible?" Ho Junji was about to speak when his expression froze. When the officials of Tensei heard Cheng Yaojin's nonsense, they felt that this fellow was still as foolish as before. But soon, their expressions froze as well. One by one, they raised their heads and looked at the roof of the hall. It had just been repaired a few days ago. The strange atmosphere gradually dissipated. "You look at me, I look at you." Li Jing had already begun to signal with his eyes, and the strongest experts were already slowly moving toward the door. Suddenly, a sigh sounded. "Ayaya." I've been discovered. That person said, "Hi, everyone. Do you still remember me? I'm Sun Lang, and I'm here to sow discord." Chapter 1022. As soon as the voice was heard, the expressions of the Tensei officials changed. A few days ago, after Sun Lang had caused a ruckus at the Copper Sparrow Terrace, he had directly rushed into the Heavenly Policy Mansion. With just a pair of palms, he had caused the generals of the Heavenly Policy Mansion to tremble in fear. Their impression of him, which had been indifferent for 2 years, had instantly become plentiful. Everyone recalled the fear of being oppressed by a certain guy. They were deeply impressed. Everything about Sun Lang left a deep impression, including Sun Lang's voice. When the voice was heard, their bodies had already subconsciously reacted. That man is here. There was no mistake. Even if Sun Lang had just turned on a voice changer and used a fake voice, the Tensei officials could still recognize him immediately. There was no other reason than that he was too despicable. Even if he changed his tone and voice, the arrogance, despicableness, and annoyance in his tone could not be concealed. In an instant, a slight wind blew in the Tensei main hall, and the bright candlelight began to sway. The highly skilled generals looked as if they were about to face a great enemy. They stared at the roof of the main hall, circulating their yuan power, and their bodies tensed up like a gradually drawn bow, ready to attack. At this moment, the door was pushed open, and Sun Lang walked in from the main door. Seeing the people looking up at the roof from all angles, he was stunned for a moment. "Are you filming the bridal chamber, Zhaoji?" Everyone was shocked, and then their faces showed anger. They were tricked by this kid again. Zhang Sun Wuji was about the same age as Sun Lang. He was handsome, and also admired Empress. At that time, he had called Sun Lang the idiot who protected the knights, and a grudge had been formed. He had always disliked Sun Lang, so when he saw him, he took a step forward and said in a low voice, "What are you doing here?" Sun Lang said sincerely, "I'm here to discuss national affairs with the Tensei General." This notorious weasel actually came to pay a New Year's visit. Everyone was not 3 years old, so how could they let their guard down? The lower the other party's attitude was, the more sinister their schemes would be. Du Qiming glanced at Feng Xiao, and Feng Xiao understood. Even if the two of them did not have a personal relationship, their tacit understanding in business was very high. Du Qiming's meaning was very simple and easy to understand. Her Highness Empress would drop the ball when she saw Sun Lang, so we have to stop this guy and not let him have any contact with Her Highness. Therefore, Feng Xiao said, "Matters of state are open and above board. There is no reason to talk in secret in the middle of the night. Your Excellency came uninvited, which is rude." As a great general of the imperial court, conspiring in secret in the middle of the night is not the way of subject. Please conduct yourself with dignity. It is inconvenient to keep guests in the middle of the night. General, please return. Sun Lang heard this and felt ashamed. He said, "Thank you for your guidance, sir. Lang is a mountain man and does not know etiquette. I have offended you, and I am ashamed. I will take my leave. Are you not going to see me out?" When Feng Xiao saw him show an expression of shame, he immediately became extremely vigilant. From his understanding of the Tensei General, this person's skin was thick. It could not be described as shameless. For such a person to be ashamed, it was really a big joke. But after hearing the last part, he could not understand the other party's thoughts. Sun Lang rolled his eyes and began to pick his nose. "Damn it, you are talking to me in such a genteel manner. Can't you understand my words? Hey, you say I don't know etiquette, so do you mean you have etiquette? Well, I don't know etiquette, so I climbed over the wall to come in. If you have etiquette, why don't you open the middle gate and beat the drums and gongs to see me out? I am the Tensei General and have outstanding military achievements. I am an official in the same court as His Highness, and my rank is the same. According to Tensei Province's etiquette, I am going to leave. Are you not going to see me out?" Feng Xiao was so angry that he almost laughed. "Damn it, see you out? If we really followed etiquette and opened the middle gate to see you out, in less than a quarter of an hour, Her Majesty would know about your night visit to Tensei Province. He argued. Your Excellency came uninvited. Naturally, you can leave as you please. Sun Lang said very sincerely, that won't do. Although you also don't know etiquette, I can't learn from you. You want me to go out through the main gate, so I will go out through the main gate. Not only will I go out through the main gate of Tensei Province, but I will also curse you in front of the gate and call you a double-standard dog. His unreasonable pestering was really disgusting. Feng Xiao had a big headache and didn't know how to deal with it. They were all respectable people of high society. Where did this shameless hooligan come from? Cheng Yaojin shouted, what a mess. What do you want to do? Sun Lang couldn't wait for someone to interrupt. So he replied with a smile, didn't I say it already? I came to sow discord. Previously, in the Jupiter Sword Palace, Ling Muley's little tricks didn't work, and my plan didn't succeed completely. Now, I naturally have to recover my losses. My target is, of course, my dear little Shir. Duke Hemming frowned and said, Your Excellency is also an outstanding person of your generation. As a dignified general of the imperial court, you don't have the slightest demeanor of an important official. You are smiling mischievously and jumping up and down. Don't you think it's too degrading? Sun Lang looked around at the Tensei officials with different expressions and said sincerely, You see, even if I am smiling mischievously and jumping up and down, you are still scared to death. You are incomparably afraid and can't do anything to me. With this kind of appearance, you want me to treat you with the bearing of an important official of the imperial court. How big is your face? These words were too much. The official's expressions changed. As the saying goes, a scholar can be killed, but not humiliated. This guy was too presumptuous. Su Shiji was seething with anger. He said sternly, Sun Lang, your martial arts are powerful, but the Tensei province is not afraid of you. You barged into this place in the middle of the night and talked nonsense. Your behavior is no different from a bandit. Even if we gather soldiers to kill you, we are in the right. Your martial arts are powerful. If you have the ability, then kill us all. He said in a sharp tone, Now, please leave immediately. Otherwise, the Heavenly Policy Mansion will treat you as an intruder who trespassed on the general's official residence and take action against you. Sun Lang was still smiling. I said, I am here to sow discord. Su Shiji clenched his teeth and said loudly, Ultimatum. General Shunsei, I will count to 3. If you don't leave by then, we will gather the guards. 1. Everything happened so suddenly that in the blink of an eye, after a short moment of shock, the officials saw that the Emperor's concubine had no objections. They all adjusted their breathing and prepared to fight. They were all people who had experienced the Tianyuan battlefield and understood the need to be decisive. In this kind of situation, perhaps a fierce and forceful response was the most correct. 2. Su Shiji shouted without hesitation. But at this moment, Sun Lang said calmly, The wood saint spirit that appeared in the Jupiter Sword Palace, Mu Li, is already dead. The one that occupied his body is the ancient sword spirit of the Earth Saint Sword. The Tensei officials who were ready to fight. Su Shiji who gave the ultimatum with a sharp gaze. The wise men who were calculating the variables of this matter. Empress Tensei, who was silent and thoughtful, quietly observing the situation. The tense hall suddenly fell into an absolute silence. It was as if time had stopped. Even Su Shiji, who had a fierce tone and a tough attitude, was extremely shocked. He could not say the last number. He became G-fatty. In this strange silence, Sun Lang stood in the hall, looking at the people who were trying their best to hide their fear and digest the information. His expression was very indifferent. There was no complacency, only a matter of course. One sentence could turn the tables. One sentence could sow discord. One sentence could stir up a storm. You have the bearing of an important official of the imperial court and a grandmaster of the martial way. This is not a loss of face, right? Are you satisfied? He looked at Su Shiji. Why aren't you counting? Call for help. Su Shiji's lips trembled. Looking at Sun Lang, his body actually trembled slightly. He did not know how to evaluate Sun Lang's behavior. He had not even finished digesting Sun Lang's words. Such words? Why did he say such words here? There was a deathly silence. Even a wise men like Feng Xiao were momentarily speechless. No one even jumped out to accuse Sun Lang of spouting nonsense and spreading rumors. What the hell was this? A smile appeared on Sun Lang's face, like a fierce beast showing its ferocious fangs. He looked at General Tensei, who had not spoken all this time, and blinked. His movements seemed a little mischievous. He said in a relaxed voice that everyone could hear, "I heard that a wise monarch has a very, very strong desire for control. He likes to set up an intelligence system, like to set up spies, monitor the people, monitor the ministers, monitor everything. He can even know clearly what the ministers eat, drink, and poop. If even the ministers need to be monitored, then the sons and daughters will naturally not be spared, especially the outstanding children, especially the children who aspire to the throne. Of course, they need to focus on monitoring. They need to plant spies around them, pay attention to their every move, and understand their political stance and daily performance. This is obviously what a wise monarch must do, because he wants to control everything. And the wise princes and princesses must also know the principle of pretending to be stupid. That is to say, they must know which of the capable generals around them are father's pawns. However, although they know it in their hearts, they will not say it. They will even put the other party in an important position and let the other party monitor and report. After all, everything has two sides. It's good to have someone to monitor them. They can show their best side to Papa, right? His smile became more and more kind. But now it's bad. The pawns planted by Papa have heard some great news. My dear daughter, shouldn't you do something? As soon as he said this, the Tensei officials who had just calmed down and digested the news became nervous again. Empress finally could not stay calm. She suddenly stood up and stared at Sun Lang. And Sun Lang, as always, looked at her with a lazy and sloppy gaze. Just like before, the way he looked at her had never changed. Lying on the soft carpet and looking at her from bottom to top, lying on the desk and looking at her with his head tilted, lying on the armchair and looking at her with his legs crossed, they were all the same. Empress's voice was a bit hoarse. What do you want to do? Sun Lang said, "Someone told me tonight that a just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support," the Emperor's concubine said indifferently. "That's what you said." Sun Lang shook his head and said, "No, I'm the one who relayed Mencius' words. Being able to say it and being able to do it are two different things. I can also recite Xiao Maxian's incantation. So, I used to believe in the principle of a just cause enjoys abundant support, but now I don't really believe it. But that person said that I can believe it. I thought about it, and practice is the only standard to test the truth. You said that too." "That's what I learned from a history textbook." Sun Lang shook his head. "But those words are obviously reasonable, so I came here to try it out and see if a just cause enjoys abundant support." He looked at the Tensei officials. He was familiar with most of the people here. They were all people who had established achievements on the Tianyuan battlefield. They were all heroes who had fought for victory in that war. So, it was very strange. The concept of a hero was very strange. Those who risked their lives on the Tianyuan battlefield and fought with all their might were undoubtedly heroes of their country and race. They made great contributions to the continuation of civilization and race. But these same people, after the victory, returned to the court and slowly changed for their own interests and desires. There are also some who changed for their own positions, just like those people who stood opposite him now. The civil and military officials under the command of Tensei Province, out of loyalty to Empress, they gathered under her command and risked their lives without complaint or regret, even if they did something wrong. Such people left the Tianyuan battlefield and returned to the vortex of people's desires. Could these old soldiers of the Tianyuan battlefield be called heroes? Did they still have the qualifications to be heroes? Conscience and interests, right and wrong and loyalty, I look forward to what choice they will make. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.